Oh, really? Yeah. I know she ran into my wife. Well, no, they weren't exactly running into each other. Someone she knows was there, but it's like, yeah, you're right in the row. Good luck with you. I'm at the Coliseum. Back from Yellowstone. There Monday the 13th. When all the flooding was in. It was interesting. You know, of course, overblown by the media. They show the same film over and over. The same bridge going over the but the water was high. Obviously, the highest I've ever seen. I've been in the 90s when it was really high and this is flooding. All right, welcome everyone. Order. I'd like to open the public meeting for Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, July 7th. Start with roll call.
Chair Pevsner. Here. Vice Chair Dennison. Here. Commissioners Dallas. Here. Hutt.
Here.
And Spears.
Present.
Now, coming to a year's term as chairman, we need to rotate the chair. So we need to vote on the incoming chairman. Vice Chair Dennison is on the chopping block. We have to, I think, officially vote, correct?
Yes.
All right, so any other nominations for chairman besides mine for
I will second the nomination.
second? All right, those in favor? Aye.
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 Are those opposed?
Too bad.
All right. It passes almost unanimously. And we also need a vice chair. I'll take nominations for vice
I
chair.
nominate John Hutt.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? Abstentions? Abstain. Okay, very good.
Doesn't matter.
I'll move over. Let me move my- Get my crook.
All right, next up is approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Next up are the approval of minutes of the June 16, 2020 Planning Commission meeting.
I have a correction. On line 66, the owner is listed as Karen. I believe his name is Terrence, T-E-R-E-N-C-E.
What was the spelling again?
T-E-R-E-N-C-E, I believe Terrence. It's my understanding of his name.
Any other corrections?
None from me.
I'll entertain a motion to accept with that edit.
I was not here, so I'm gonna have to abstain.
I'll move to approve the minutes with the edit noted.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I also have to abstain.
All those against? Any abstentions?
Abstentions? Yes.
All right, motion carries 302. All right, just a note about community input. We will hear community input for a duration of 3 minutes per speaker, and we will take both community input now on items not on the agenda, and then at the end of our deliberation, at the end of our presentation for today's topic, or public hearing rather, we will allow for public comment at that time.
Chair, will we be having council liaison reports?
Absolutely.
Helps. I got that drop foot, so that helps.
Hi there. Congratulations on your chairmanship. Just a quick update. You may have seen on the last city council meeting agenda, we considered both the TUP ordinance revisions that you had passed along under recommendation, as well as the filming permit ordinance that I know that you guys spent a lot of time weighing in on, and that the Community Services Commission also passed along recommendations. So in terms of outcome, we actually ended up continuing the discussion on both, largely because of the overlap between them, as well as the overlap with the consideration of the Alverno CUP that I know is on your future agenda. So there was a fair amount of discussion and some direction to staff to come back with some information. But one item that was considered as part of the discussion was exempting institutional properties from these two ordinances as sort of the default, with having those institutional properties instead be governed by their own CUP or master plan. If they didn't have one, then the default rules under the code would apply. But I think if that ends up being part of what is approved, I think council would appreciate you guys taking that into account when you do consider the Alverno CUP at your upcoming meeting. So that's all I have that's official business. If anybody's wondering, the Sierra Madre All-Star Little League score, I will be checking periodically, so just call over and I'll tell you what's going on.
Thank you. All right, at this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 3 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda are available for your convenience on the city's website. State legislation limits the Commission's ability to take action on specific requests. We are also limited to the placement of items on the agenda for action 72 hours prior to meetings, except for specific findings. No action or discussion may be undertaken by the Planning Commission on any item if not posted on the agenda, except the commissioners or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by the public, or a commissioner or staff liaison may ask a question for clarification or make a brief report on his or her own activities. At this time, is there anybody who would like to provide community input for any item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to our public hearing. Does staff have a report?
I just have a couple of opening remarks. Again, this is a continued public hearing from our June 2nd meeting. The Planning Commission is considering Phase 1 proceedings to amend the general plan and zoning code and subsequent land use map and zoning map, approve a lot line adjustment, adopt a specific plan, enter into a development agreement, and recommended the City Council certification of a final environmental impact report and a mitigation monitoring and reporting program. There are 17 slides. I'm not going to go through these. These are the action items from the June 2nd meeting. They are all included in your packet. The colored items include comments preceding the June 2nd meeting from the majority of the commissioners. And at this time, instead of going line by line, I'm going to give the floor to the applicant. Jonathan will be presenting and explaining how the plan either meets or does not meet many of these items.
Before we launch in, can we just have a little discussion of expectations? Because at our last meeting, we listed a number of significant concerns. We even followed those up in writing, as you can see. And the plan was that staff was going to negotiate with the applicant to get amendments to the proposal to accommodate these concerns or to address the concerns. And in lieu of putting back a proposal to us that we could review ahead of this meeting, the applicant decided to make a presentation tonight. So the applicant is going to make a presentation that none of the commissioners know what's going on, none of this community knows. So I just want to make sure no one has the expectation that we're going to vote up or down on this project tonight, because we're just hearing this stuff right now. And we really need time to consider and understand and digest both, I think, the commission and the community. So I want to make sure we're not going to get that pressure like we did last time to vote too early. If you wanted us to vote on this tonight, we should have had a proposal at least 72 hours ahead of time that we could have properly and thoroughly reviewed and digested.
So, yes, there isn't the expectation that we're going to request that you vote today. I've seen some elements of this presentation, but not all myself, and that's why I didn't elaborate further in the staff report. It was a lot of material for the applicant to put together, and also Jonathan Frankel, as well as some of the other team members, are here and will be making a presentation to the commission as well.
Great, thank you.
Claire. Well, Commissioners, good evening. Chair Dennison, congratulations. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity once again to be here to discuss the Meadows project with you. Since our last meeting, our team has been very hard at work making a number of substantial modifications to the plan in response to your feedback, and we're looking forward to walking you through those changes this evening. Tonight, you're going to hear from me as well as a couple other members, lead members of our design team. I want to focus on architecture, the park, and a few other items as well. Firstly, there was a request by the commission at our last meeting just for some examples of communities that we at Urban West have built. So, we've been in business for about 70 years, built and planned thousands of homes throughout Southern California, and I just wanted to highlight several of our single-family projects. It's not the only thing that we do. And so we have a number of examples here. These are just representative samples of projects in Santa Monica, Huntington Beach, Simi Valley, and Escondido. A number of these styles, the farmhouse style, the craftsman style, and the Spanish style, of course, are included in this project. And so we're very familiar with these styles and have a long track record of delivering homes that we believe look very nice, as well as function for families and provide great space for families to grow and thrive. So open space conservation. This was an issue we worked very closely with the Passionist on, and Commissioner Hutt's feedback led us to what we hope is a very acceptable conclusion, which is that the Passionists have agreed to both restrict the use of the area immediately north of the retreat center, as well as create a separate legal lot, as well as rezone that area to open space as requested. So there will now be 3 conservation parcels, as you see on the screen, the 2 to the north and the third, they're shown in orange. Again, there will be no habitable structures there. That language has been incorporated into the development agreement that we presented to the Passionist. And I will say they were somewhat reluctant to do this, very reluctant perhaps, but we know that this was a significant item and request, and we wanted to make sure that we did everything possible to accommodate this request. We know many comments, many really thoughtful and helpful comments related to house size. Firstly, the specific plan has been modified to adopt the R1 definition of floor area as requested. So that is the Sierra Madre Municipal Code. It has been adopted verbatim with no changes. And I will show you how that has actually resulted in a decrease in the overall floor area. But we are using the Sierra Madre Municipal Code for floor area, both gross floor area and net floor area in the specific plan. So continuing related to house size, as we mentioned at our last meeting, we reduced the maximum floor area by over 1,000 square feet per unit on the largest units to 3,775. And that results in a reduction of over 17,000 square feet of gross floor area being removed from the project. So that is very substantial from both an economic and a business standpoint. We know that was very important to the commission. And furthermore, and I'm going to talk about the unit mix, but we understand that there was a great concern, and it was unclear. We did not do a good enough job explaining how we intended on delivering a unit mix, which is that we did not at all and would never intend on building 4,800 square foot houses on every single lot. But what we wanted to do was both establish an average, maximum average, which is 3,500 for the entire project, as well as a unit mix requirement. This is table 3.3 that's been modified and included in the specific plan. And what this demonstrates is that 60% of the project will not be the largest Plan 3 units. It actually requires a minimum Plan 1s. It's 25% of the project must be 1 story. We're going to show you a little bit later where those are located as well. We have also located those units. Plan 2 is at 35% maximum and a Plan 3 at a 40% maximum. So again, we did not intend at all to plot and build the largest units on every lot. So not only have we reduced the homes by 1,000 square feet, but we're committing to a unit mix. Now, we don't know exactly what plan is going to be plotted on each lot. That will happen during your design review phase, but you can rest assured that 60% of the project will not be those largest Plan 3 units. So we call this mix the 25, 35, 40 mix. You see the numbers at bottom of the screen.
Sorry, do you want questions at the end or as we go along?
Yeah, if you could hold your questions till the end, that'd be great. I would like to rifle through this. Appreciate that. Thank you. So Plan 1, Plan 2, and Plan 3, 11, 14, and 17 units respectively. And again, a minimum number of 1 stories, and we're going to show you where those are located. So a number of changes made to the design. We understand the desire for a little bit of variation, additional curvature in the street. This is difficult in a tight site with a lot of topography like this, but as you can see, we did modify the street radius to the maximum extent feasible to create some additional curvature in the middle of those streets. Obviously, Sunnyside and Carter are also currently curved, and we think this is going to create a nice experience along the street scene. Further, there was a request that streets A, B, and C be designed with the same width, and that has been done. All 3 of those streets are the same width. And finally, as last meeting, the parking has been moved to the north sides of street A, B, and C. So at this time, I want to ask one of our lead design professionals, Everardo Garcia with LCRA, to come and talk about bulk and mass and how we're approaching this issue. We know that it's very critical to the Commission.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chair Dennison. My name is Everardo Garcia, and I'm with LCRA Architects. And I'm here to talk a little bit more about some of the concerns that were expressed. First of all, in particular to changes, there was some concern about massing. So what has been done, we've looked at and we've added a requirement to locate 1-story houses at the corner lots to reduce massing. And what you can see here in our plot, the orange houses on the lots, every corner of the street has a 1-story house. We have also introduced a 1-story house at the entry to the project and one at the top of Sunnyside. And then we also have a few Plan 3s on street A at the top in order to work with some view opportunities for the retreat. One thing about the 1-story plans, they reduce the mass to create a transition from the 1-story to the additional lots and houses, the 2-story houses as you go down the streets. They will also have different elevations. So they have been conceptually plotted so no elevation repeats right next to each other as you're driving up the street. You will have a variation. We have also added additional plane breaks and articulation on the front elevations to reduce bulk and mass from the street. The plans designed with different footprints allowing for 1-story mass up front and porches to create varied front setbacks. What you can see in this exhibit here Um, You can see how we've looked at the plans as we studied the first and second floors. We've allowed the building to modulate, so the building second floor modulates and pulls away from the ground floor in order to create some lower forms. What you can see here, the orange represents one-story elements. As you look at the plan, the kind of teal color becomes a second story, and you can start seeing how it starts to pull away from the front. We have some one-story elements in the front, and then with the addition of the porch, which is shown in the yellow, it starts to introduce these different forms and different elevation plane breaks that creates interest in the street scene. What's also interesting, what we've tried to do is also continue that same element on the sides and rear of the houses. So as you can see on the side of the plan 2s and 3s, we have pushed back the second floor, allowed for lower one-story elements to introduce roof, and also to reduce the bulk. So that together with the plotting and the variation of the plotting and plan and elevation plotting, you will have a variety of mass represented on the block. You won't have a repetition that would become monotonous. That would become more of an eclectic street scene, which is more in keeping with Sierra Madre. Get this right. Oops, sorry. The other item I wanted to talk about was the way the houses have been designed. All our one-story plants will work within the angle plane encroachments. So they will all fall within the envelope nicely. There won't be any problem with those. What you're seeing are the angle encroachment planes shown on the elevations for the plan 2s and 3s as well. This represents the tightest condition on the most restrictive narrow lot. So as you can see, even on our narrowest lot, our only encroachment are some portions of the roof on the plan 2s and plan 3, just minor. Now this,
I'm sorry, I know we were gonna say, but I don't know which ones are Plan 1s and Plans 2s and Plan 3s on this.
oh, I'm sorry, they have the name underneath. They have farmhouse, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so used to seeing them that I just think about that. But let me run this through you. The first one is the Plan 1, the modern one-story. The next one, the modern two-story, is a Plan 2. The Craftsman is a Plan 2. The farmhouse is a Plan 3, and then the Spanish is a Plan 1. So as you can see, the Plan 1s easily fall within the encroachment plane. The modern two-story and the Craftsman have a minor encroachment, as does the Plan 3. Now this again represents the narrowest condition, which would be on Street B. Now, actually, with Street A and C are the narrowest lots. Then we would have Sunnyside, which has wider lots, as well as Street B. And in those lots, all the houses would fall within the encroachment plane because we have wider lots to capture that. So what ends up happening is 64% of all the lots would fall within the encroachment plane. The other 36% would just have minor encroachments into that. Now, another element we wanted to look at was to prohibit repetition of the same style with the same floor plan on each street. I know that was a concern you had. By utilizing the proposed unit mix 25, 35, 40, the unit plotting along the street allows for varied massing and elevation mix along each street scene. No plan and elevation combination is repeated along the street. So luckily, first of all, our mix are 3 plans, 4 elevations each. Our streets aren't very long, so by the time we plot all the houses, each run of each street will have a mix of floor plan and elevation, so we don't get to repeat the same combination. So that in itself will allow for a nice eclectic mix on the street scene. A way to further enhance the variety, there is the use of the colored materials. Each architectural style will have 3 color schemes that are part of it. So in doing so, each color scheme is composed of colors, trim, stucco, siding, or stone, and they would vary per elevation to create another 3 elevations for each style. So that, again, will create another level of diversity on the street. And what also happens is the plans are designed to complement architectural styles. Each plan is modified with nuanced changes to reflect the front elevation style. The way these houses are designed is in order to accomplish each individual style, each base plan has to be slightly manipulated to reflect the elevation that it's going to take on. And in doing so, it allows for some modulation. It allows for the changing of size of a porch, of the massing, the entry. And in doing so, it also allows to create a variety of setbacks because it starts changing even between a Plan 2 Craftsman, a Plan 2 Spanish, because of the change in the entries. It starts to create a little bit more modulation on the street scene. And then the next element of that is that what we've looked at in looking at the architecture is we wanted to create a 4-sided architecture, which is really important and makes them feel like a true house as opposed to just having a facade that changes. In doing so, all the materials, the architectural detailing continues around the house to make it a complete unit. We've always felt the rear elevations of these houses were important because they do face the views. So the rears have also been considered as we started looking at it. So massing, architectural detailing, materials have continued all the way around, and the massing follows the architectural style. So we feel that it presents itself on all sides. I think on this exhibit, you can also see the modulation on the sides of the elevation, where we start having 1-story elements starting to break the wall planes. And you have some combination of layering of forms to start breaking up the massing, which I think starts to allow it to kind of feel comfortable within the site. With that, I would like to pass it back to Jonathan.
Thanks very much, Ev. And so as you can see, I think we worked really hard to address concerns related to size, of course, providing all the elevations and making sure that we understand the concern about cookie cutter design and not keeping with Sierra Madre character, how we were going to do that and creating the additional articulation and plane breaks. So in addition to the architecture, at this time, I want to invite up one of our lead landscape designers, Aslan Hare with Ground Level, to talk about changes made to the landscape design.
Thank you all for having us here this evening. I just want to run through, as Jonathan mentioned, some of the landscape design that we've been looking at and revising based on the feedback we've been receiving through this process. So I wanted to clarify a few things about the trees. So we'll be planting 493 trees with our current plan on this site. So that's a 480% increase with what is there now in the existing condition. Also, those trees are all going to be trees that are either native or highly adaptive to this area, and also are trees that are approved by the county and CAL FIRE for this particular fire zone. which is really important given the open space that it's adjacent to, and also the idea that we do really want to make this be a part of this landscape and this wonderful natural habitat that we are lucky enough to abut up to. The other thing you'll see on this graphic is that we've doubled the number of trees located on all 3 of the cross streets since the last time we reviewed this plan. The curvature of those streets has allowed us to pocket in a few more trees, which will give us a lot more shade on those roads. And also with the parking on the north side of the street, that starts protecting those vehicles as they're parked with shade. And that will help us reduce that heat island effect that's so important, especially out in these areas where we're fairly exposed up against open space. The next 2 slides are a series of highly conceptual sections. We wanted to start looking into our neighbors at our park's south boundary and start seeing how the views of the grading there would start to impact their experience living up against this public park that we're proposing. So again, these are conceptual. We're working off of record data at this point for the private residences that are adjacent to our space. But as we move through the design process, we're really looking forward to looking and working with each of the residences. So these are specific homes that we're interpolating off of that record data. But we're really looking forward to seeing how we can increase those view sheds and take advantage of that nice buffer space that's there with the berm, but also make sure that the park itself isn't too impactful upon their experience in their own homes and their backyards. So you'll see here, we had previously shown these with trees. We've taken those out in order to increase the view shed. And so we're seeing a palette of basically native shrubs that we'd like to weave in through here along those berms to provide that buffer space.
Could I ask a question since you're at the podium?
Sure.
Is the berm for acoustic reasons? Because it seems like you could, if it's just a view thing, you could do it with bushes or a tall hedge or.
You want to circle back to that? You want to speak
Oh,
to that?
I'm
Because there's
sorry.
a few reasons.
I thought I was saving disruption.
Yeah. A couple different reasons for the berm, Commissioner Dallas, but primarily it's for drainage. And we have our civil engineer, Winnie Tam, here if you want more detail about it. But in order for the stormwater to be directed into the vault system, we have to have a berm on that edge. So the berm itself is necessary. The planting around the berm and the fencing, that is open to whatever you should desire.
Is that helpful, Commissioner?
Sort of. The berm seems higher than the berm seems higher than it needs to be just for drainage. But you know, I get the concept at least now that what you're going for.
Winnie's going to come up. She's our civil engineer.
Hi.
Hi, Winnie Tam with Fusco Engineering. So through the process of entitlement with the city staff, it was requested by, we've been working with the city staff on our entitlement plans, and one of the requirements from the city public works required us to detain 100% of our water. So we're building a retention actually, not detention, retention system under the park, and to keep the water there, we're also using a sunken park to accommodate a depressed detention. So it offsets the amount of detention or retention that needs to be built underground by detaining a portion above ground. So the height of the berm is related to how much volume we're trying to retain. So it offsets how much we actually have to build underground by doing partial above ground. So it's a volume exercise.
So
In a large event, it would hold water for a short period of time before it infiltrates into the ground.
So the park would occasionally flood, and
Yes.
that's why. Okay,
Yes.
well, now I'm getting the idea a little bit.
Yeah, and then as Jonathan had mentioned before, the planting and the mix of how we treat that buffer is really something that, with that berm in place, we can design however is appropriate as we move through that design process. So in these sections, we show fences that would be, or walls, existing fences and walls that are on the residences' sides. But then as you look over towards the park we are looking at different ways. We want to make sure people aren't able to walk through that brush, for example, so we want to look at different ways to actually provide a hard edge for that, and then also provide things like, you know, the errant soccer ball or something like that, from having another barrier basically so it doesn't intrude on somebody's residence and a neighboring property. So these are more of these sections, just looking at, and you can see that each, again, these are, you know, kind of a small scale, right? But we're looking at something very conceptual, but you can see that every single lot along that southern boundary has a different experience and a different condition to that park. And so actually what's kind of exciting about this from a design perspective is that when we get into the planting of that, we can actually really use that native planting buffer it's kind of an exciting design, not problem, but process, right? To be able to bring that in, bring native plants in, allow them to grow as they naturally would, and be able to have a different edge condition as you move across the entire park. And then we also just wanted to clarify a few things. So on the left of the slide, you'll see the maintenance district shown in red. We had a couple of different ways of calling this out, a few different ways of managing this land. So we've simplified the way that we're proposing to manage this. So a maintenance district in red, and that includes the parkways of all of the streets. It includes the slope, the sort of slopes that are on the back side of the homes coming down to each of the cross streets, and it includes the public park. On the right side of the slide, you'll see that we eliminated parking within the proposed park area. So you'll see that we now have the 2 required accessible parking spots with the accessible access piece in between them, and we've removed the other parking spots in order to reduce that traffic into the park itself. Thank you very much.
Commissioners, our entire team is here in the event that you have any questions, but we really appreciate, again, the opportunity to present these changes to you. We understand that you're seeing them tonight for the first time, but of course, at this time or later in the meeting, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there questions on the presentation?
No, but I will commend the applicant because this answers a lot of the things that were bothering us, and I think you brought some people with experience in dealing with the planning commission to your team, so you get points for that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
On the maintenance district that you just presented, do you have an overall sort of a lateral drawing of all those slopes? Because you show the individual streets and the little berms on there. Do you have something that sort of shows the cumulative?
We do have a section, Commissioner, and that is included in the specific plan. I don't have it in this particular presentation, but I'd be happy to get it to staff and they could direct you to that section.
Thanks. Okay.
Yeah, on the water retention in the park, we talked about the retaining all the surface runoff, but in the, well, I guess outdated specific plan, it shows the eastern portion going to the retention, underground retention, and the western just going down into the storm drain. And so I was sort of expecting to see a modification of that so that the western drain would come into the retention as well. And so I'm just inquiring about that.
Sure. Winnie, do you want to speak to the storm drain?
So the west side is a county flood control facility, and we are allowed to exit the same amount of volume or Q that's allowed out to the west side. So the flood control allows us to release the same amount of water that it's receiving today. Anything above and beyond that point has to go into detention. So we're not allowed to release more than what's currently allowed out today.
But the whole thing about being net zero and saving water, if we could retain that water and infiltrate it, it would, help our water independence, right? Instead of just having that water go out to the ocean.
Yeah, so I don't know the percentage of how much is actually infiltrated, but it is an extremely high amount of volume that is being retained. From a drainage standpoint, I don't have the hydrology here, but the west side of the site, I want to say 20% of it probably exits. The other 80% is probably, and looking at it, I'm just going off memory off the hydrology map, it is about 80% of it would go into the ground. Only a small portion exits the site. So obviously, the more you infiltrate, the more you divert. If you were to divert 100% and infiltrate it, it just equates to more infrastructure underground and more costs or more depression in the park.
Okay.
That's what it would be.
Isn't there a lateral that picks up on Sunnyside and crosses diagonally across the park to go into the underground drainage that goes from the settling basin all the way down?
There
There's-
is a storm drain that runs down Sunnyside
Right,
with 2 catch basins that go into Sunnyside.
right.
Exits the site. There is a low flow. We're required to treat low flow first before we let it out. So the low flow is treated within the park
Okay.
before it exits the site. So the high flow will exit, the low flow will stay in the park and treat.
Okay.
So, and then secondary, from flood standpoint, we are required to allow what's called an emergency in case everything
Yeah.
everything
I
plugs
get
up.
the emergency, sure.
We have to allow emergency. So the emergency is similar to what exists today, which is out.
Sunnyside, right?
The right.
No, Carter.
Crestwell.
Oh, Crestvale, yeah, because it cuts across, but it picks up on Sunnyside, and the underground cuts across Crestvale, and eventually ends up into the underground that goes down Lima,
No, nothing goes on Lima. There's no storm drain to Lima.
underneath.
No, not today.
Really?
Not proposed either. Nothing connects to any storm drain to the east. Secondary will surface out if everything were to, in a emergency, it has to go out somewhere off the site. So nothing connects to Lima today, or what we're proposing. We're not connecting there.
Oh,
Okay, and then a question with regard to the timing of this, which I don't know if this is staff or applicant, but there's a certain time when the applicant is required to deliver the park. Is the retention and storm drain portion of it that's not delivered at the same time as the park, right? That comes before and is covered by the bonds, and then the park comes later? I just want to make sure that if for some reason we don't get the park, at least the storm drain infrastructure is in.
Yeah, so the storm drain infrastructure will be required to be constructed. During construction, we'll have temporary BMPs. So we're going to have temporary facilities, basins during the period of construction. But all the infrastructure will be built, once we're graded, will be built along the roads, the storm drain, all that will be built first. So even if the park was not delivered for some reason, although we are conditioned, of course, to deliver it, that infrastructure would be in place.
Okay. And then a similar timing question, and also a little confusion I have on the off-site improvements on Carter, because the off-site improvements in the final EIR show the sidewalk straight against Wyden Carter, which my understanding was we were moving that to save some of the trees. So I'm wondering where that diagram is, and I want to make sure it gets included, because that's the one we want, right, into to the final documents. And then what is the timing on delivery of the off-site?
So with respect to Carter, and that diagram is not in this presentation, but we can provide it. So there are a few different options. The option that is currently in the specific plan does avoid impacts to the vast majority of the trees. And I don't have the number off the top of my head. I want to say it was like 3 trees are in fact removed, and all of the deodars remained. We know that was very critical. And so that straight alignment that you see actually results in the removal of very few trees. If you're more interested in that, our arborist Ryan Allen is here. He took a look. He actually went out to the site and took a look and produced that graphic to talk about which trees would be removed. So the straight alignment, again, results in a relatively few trees being removed and all the deodars being retained.
So does that mean we're doing the straight alignment and not the curved alignment? I mean, my preference is the curved alignment, but I just want to make sure we get these details straightened out. And then as far as timing, what's the timing on when those off-site improvements are delivered?
That's an item for staff. Yeah.
So I believe the timing for it would depend on the expansion of the Carter, and that's going to depend on the applicant's conversation with the county. So as of right now, we have no idea of telling.
Okay, and it also, and maybe I didn't read this correctly, but in trying to interpolate between the specific plan, the EIR, and the development agreement, I didn't see that the offsites were bonded. And maybe they're included in the utilities, but it wasn't clear to me. I want to make sure that the offsites are included in the bonding, because here's my concern. I don't see a timing set forth, right? So if it just doesn't happen, then what do we do? Because I think we're all thinking, okay, there's a big traffic issue, big safety concern on Carter. It's going to be addressed by this widening. So we want to make sure it actually happens.
Noted.
And does this mean that we have to be okay with the straight plan because we don't know whether or not the county will take the suggested plan?
Well, it'd be helpful to receive an update from the applicant regarding their conversation with the county, maybe.
Sure. So to date, we have discussed with the county the acquisition of approximately 10 feet of right-of-way to accommodate the widening. So we have not presented any particular alignment. Generally, the feedback that we got is they would be open to acquiring the right-of-way for road and sidewalk purposes, but that they can't make a determination until an EIR is certified for the project. So they need, to know that there's a project and that the environmental review has been completed before making a determination on their process, because they will then tier off of the EIR that has been certified by the city and making a determination on the acquisition of the right-of-way. So that is a critical item in their process, but generally they are open and they do routinely grant right-of-way for road widening and sidewalks. So it's really for the commissioners to determine. When we looked at the kind of undulated sidewalk scenario, in order to meet ADA access requirements, given the grade there, it required a lot of switchbacks and landings. So I think our preference would be, given that we were able to minimize impacts to the most sensitive mature trees, that we keep the straight alignment.
Just for the record, I don't remember either plan, so it's like, it'd be really helpful to know what we're talking about here, the two different paths. Is there any way to pull that up? Is that handy anywhere?
So I do not have that handy. That was probably, this is our fourth meeting. Maybe it was probably in the presentation provided in the last meeting. We showed a graphic showing impacts to trees and the alignment of that, as well as a section. But all of that was previously provided to the commission, but perhaps
we're
Claire
gonna
can
pull
link
that
it.
graphic up.
Oh, okay, thanks.
In the meantime, if you wanted to ask further questions.
I've got a question. We're seeing a lot of new images. Before we're asked to vote, will we see an updated specific plan that has all these wonderful things we've been talking about over the past few meetings?
That would be staff's desire, so that we could move that forward to city council. Yes.
Perhaps not in a published form, maybe in a digital form, but yes.
Just, I'd like to see something in writing, could be in quotes, writing, but digital, yeah.
Is the concept with the percentages of different plans, those are not going to be fixed at this date, but they're going to be fixed when the track map is approved. Is that right?
So the percentages, Commissioner Hutt, will be fixed now. So you will know the
Yep.
percentage of Plan 3, 1, 2, and 3s. The exact plotting, where exactly those will be, that is subject to change during your design review, and of course your input as to, well, I actually think maybe a Plan 2 is better suited in this particular location. So we will come back with the final proposed plotting for your review and comment during design review.
But once we approve the track map that takes those percentages and actually puts them on the lots, that'll freeze the floor area for those lots, right? Because you had the 3 different tiers. And so I'm just saying, like, you build a Plan 1, right? I want to make sure that 5 years later, a homeowner doesn't come in and decide, I'm gonna put a second story and lots of extra square footage, up to whatever the maximum is.
Sure, yeah. Once the plotting is approved during the design review by the commission, that will remain in place. So there will be no subsequent changes after the design review is approved by the commission.
Okay, that's good.
But the location of the first stories is set now, or is that also?
Correct.
subject?
So in order to address concerns about massing, as well as view protection from Madre de la Rosa, we have committed in the specific plan to locate where the one stories will be, including, so in addition to the minimum percentage of 25, we've also located them. So those will be set. The locations on the corners will be set. Those will be Plan 1s. The exact elevation, whether it's a Plan 1 Spanish or modern or Craftsman, that will be subject to design review. But provided that it meets your approval, we think it makes good sense to locate them in these areas, again, in order to reduce bulk and mass.
And then we saw, I think, 5 different combination of houses in this presentation, but you've got 3 plans and 3 styles, so theoretically you could have 9. Are you only gonna have 5, or is there 9, or is that even yet to be determined?
There's 3 plans and 4 styles, so it's a total of 12.
What's the 4th style?
So you have a Craftsman, Farmhouse, Modern, and Spanish.
Okay.
And those come in 3 different colors each, so it just keeps going.
Correct. So
And you can
Commissioner
reverse,
Dallas
right?
is correct. So you have quite a few permutations, and that is precisely why we will be committing in the specific plan to not repeat the same plan in the same elevation on a street. So as you walk down Street A, you will never see the same house in the same plan repeat twice.
That's good.
Yeah, okay, that's great. I just wanted to make sure I understood that all those options are available and not just the 5. The 5 you were showing us were just examples.
Correct. Yeah, we wanted to elevate for you in all 4 elevations, all of the styles. But there's obviously, we didn't elevate every single plan. So what you're seeing is elevations for every single possible style. And then there's a whole bunch of different iterations when you get into colors and different plans. There are many, many permutations.
And then on the sort of overview plan that you showed us, you showed a variation in setback on some of the, how is that going to be regulated?
Yeah, so that will come in with the plotting. And so we're working with LCRA about the plane break between the first and the second story. You can see most of them have significant plane breaks. So for example, you may have a den on the first floor, and then the second story may be set back 15 feet from that. So that will all be part of the final elevation package that we bring to you in design review. And then you'll be able to say, well, I think it should be pushed farther or closer, or we're okay with it or not okay with it.
Okay, thanks.
So here, thank you, Claire. A magician with our previous proposals. So we did present, and this was in your May meeting, Carter sidewalk options 1 and 2. So both options, again, must comply with ADA requirements. And so option 1 results in the removal of 4 cypress. So I was 1 short. 4 cypress, but all of the deodars remain. And that's the option located, I think it's orange color. And then we have option 2, which is to curve to bring the sidewalk into the park. Results in more ramps and switchbacks. It's a little bit more meandering, kind of not as efficient, but that is an option that would avoid impacts to trees. So these were the 2 options that were provided. Claire, is there another slide here? The next slide? So this is, here it is. So these are both of the options, and you can see where the trees are, and the legend is a little bit small, but it denotes trees being removed, impacted, and encroached. So the 3 categories. But when you look at removals, again, there were relatively few in, I'll call it option 1, which is the straight alignment. Option 2, of course, avoids those trees. So if you look immediately to the south of where the blue line is, those are the trees that would be removed, that are retained by pulling the sidewalk into the park. Now this would require additional coordination, obviously, with the county, because now we're encroaching in creating additional improvements within their property. So that has not been part of our conversations, but certainly we would be happy to advance either of these options. Again, we think that the straight alignment being both efficient and resulting in fairly minimal overall tree removals, as well as meeting ADA, being the straightest and most direct way to get to the public park, and to the north to the homes. That would probably be our preference, but these were the 2 options that were presented.
What is the grade change between the red path and the blue path?
Yeah, I think we would have to get back to you, Commissioner Dallas. We evaluated this a couple of months ago, and then proceeded with the straight route after it appeared to us, at least, that there was some level of comfort given the limited number of tree removals with the straight option, and that would be easier to meet compliance requirements, easier to meet ADA. So, but there was a grade differential, and I'd be happy to get that information for you.
Yeah, my concern is that people with strollers or wheelchairs or just heart conditions will step out into the street.
Right, because it is somewhat circuitous. I think that was a concern that we shared. It is a somewhat circuitous route, and so often people, instead of taking the longer route, will simply walk into the street, and it creates potential conflict with traffic.
So I would have safety concerns with the inland route.
Anybody else have more questions? So I guess a question I have is, for the design review, we have very objective standards that we have to compare against, and we have 3 meetings to get through all of it-ish, maybe 4.
Correct, and the standards being what you have here, that's going to be incorporated into the specific plan.
And so that's exactly my question. Glad you mentioned that. If there are, I think I heard 12 permutations, are we going to have those all documented, and we'll have the shall language, shall substantially represent the representations that we've seen? Is that how that will work, so that, go ahead.
I don't believe that the permutations you saw today are the final design, but the applicant can correct me if I'm wrong. Will the applicant have 12 final designs at this point in the process?
So we have not created elevations for every single possible permutation, but I think what the specific plan can absolutely do is lay out the numbers that will be required, the number of permutations. So for example, we will be required to present 3 floor plans in these 4 styles, and we can do the math on the total number if that is what the commission desires, to ensure that those options will be presented, that we're not going to be eliminating an option arbitrarily, for example. We are absolutely committed to creating that diversity in that total number.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to solve for is the specific plan is our rubric against which we say this should be changed, or this substantially conforms to what we were presented. And so I guess I'm trying to understand how we document what it is that we then have to approve against. Does that make sense?
It does, and maybe I can provide an example. So if for example, you have a Spanish-style home that's supposed to be 2 stories, your question is, if that's presented to the Planning Commission at the design review phase, and you want to move the window, or you feel like the massing should be different, how do you control that at the design review phase? Is that?
That's exactly my question. And
Right.
more, I think that they've added some beautiful articulation in a lot of these houses that conforms with exactly what we generally ask for anytime there's a second story. And so if it then comes back and it's a square box,
Yep.
where have we how do we have the ability to come back and say, this isn't really what the specific plan said?
Right. And I think at the design review phase, the Planning Commission will only have the opportunity to provide input, but cannot control where the windows would go, or if the massing should be set further back, or any of that stuff. So to the extent the Planning Commission wants to control any of that, it would have to be in the specific plan.
Okay. Because, I mean, one of the issues is we saw some good-looking houses, except for the fake rock on the farmhouse. Which and also, like I said, a lot of articulation, the use of 1-story elements, which was shown on the site plan, demonstrated that. I just want to make sure we don't get boxes, when it comes back. And so we need to think of a way to bake that in, and maybe part of it is including that site plan that shows that there's 1-story elements, And including, even if they're not the exact 12 that you're going to have, include them as examples. So if we get boxes, you know, when we look at it in round 2, we can say, hey, this doesn't look anything like what was presented to us as a specific plan stage. But if you move a window here and there, or wisely lose the fake rock, then I think we're all going to be fine and saying, okay, that's great.
I think we should keep the fake rock, but certainly, just kidding. I think that, that's definitely my concern. I'm not looking to move a window here, a window there. I'm looking to go from the nice articulation that we've been shown, make sure that that follows through, right? And I think that massing is a different level of design than is a window here and a window there.
So I think then it would be helpful if the planning commission could identify those specific elements of the design that they want to ensure are reflected in the final design at the design review level, and staff can work with the applicant to try to figure out some language to include in the specific plan to make sure that happens.
It's not unusual for us to have, in documentations, we want to see this and not this, and have examples. And so, the applicant tonight has given us examples that I looked at very favorably. So can we then capture that and saying, this is what we're expecting in terms of an example of the final?
So in terms of not having so much a standard, but having like a list of recommendations for the design, and for the applicant to follow that list of recommendations in.
Or
If you look at One Carter, it has a design guide, and the design guide is very clear. To
Right, it
Commissioner
shows
Spears'
pictures.
examples, it has a picture.
Yeah.
The garage will not face the street. It's got a big X over it. It shall turn and you enter it through the side, right? So there's images of each that indicate this is okay, this is not okay. And so if staff can work with the applicant, and I think that we're happy to provide that input once we have it in our hands and can look at it and kind of try to, I'm going to use the wrong word, articulate that. But I think that that's a great way to proceed.
Yeah, and I think the applicant's design team is very familiar with those design guidelines, so they're not a foreign concept. But I do think that, that site plan you showed us is a really important tool, and I would include that because it really shows how there are one-story, two-story elements, and I would include the samples, and we could say, you have to have some first-story elements and sort of list some of those things. So it's a combination of guidelines and this, not this, and then a couple shalls.
Understood.
That was my biggest
Yeah,
concern with all of that, is translating it so that we.
And that addresses the issue that we will have with design review, because we have a limited opportunity at that point.
That's right.
So we wanted to spend some time on the development agreement. Would this be an opportunity to do that now, or did you want to continue? Do you have additional questions regarding more of the specific plan concepts?
Yes, I have something on the specific plan, where we, in land use, under 3.3, it talks about the amenities that the park may have. It would be really great to say they shall have these things, and if it's not exactly that, when it comes around, those would be like minor adjustments. It's a balance of a certain amount of quantity of really cool stuff, and so this says shall. I think that would, set the quality and quantity of what the park would have in it.
Anything else before we move on to the the development agreement?
No, I think it's fine to talk about concepts for the development agreement, but until we get the revised specific plan, you can't really fully vet the development agreement, because like a lot of the stuff is what's in the specific plan or the EIR.
But if you have an update for us on it, I think we'd be grateful to hear that.
So during that 1 month period that, between the last meeting and this meeting, staff did go back to the applicant with the list of issues that you identified, that the commission identified. And as you can see, we negotiated those points with the applicant. Some of those points are reflected in the applicant's presentation. The other points are going to be reflected in this development agreement. And if Senior Planner Lynn can scroll down to section 3, please. And you'll see red line edits. Oh, right there, a little further up. Yep, option 1, perfect. So if you look at the draft development agreement, there are actually 2 options in there. The applicant, Madre de la Rosa, agreed to option 1, and that's essentially what the applicant represented here. That parcel on which the retreat center sits is going to be divided, and once it's divided, the northernmost portion is going to be rezoned to open space, and a conservation easement is going to be placed upon it. So therefore, you're going to have 3 parcels to the north of the retreat center that are all going to be open space, and they're all going to have a conservation easement. And that's all that says. And with respect to the way we were able to resolve the Madre de la Rosa's biggest concern, which was that they didn't want any kind of limitation on their ability to develop that northern site for some kind of shrine or religious purpose, that a director's interpretation would be issued ahead of time to ensure that, to basically explaining that a shrine in that location would be consistent with the open space development standards. And so they could have that in hand and wouldn't have to be concerned about their ability to develop it with some kind of religious use like that in the future. But it would not be developed for housing, and that's going to be made clear in the conservation easement.
Right. If they're gonna change the zoning and general plan designation, then we're gonna have to do another general plan and zoning amendment.
At a later time, yes.
Well, at that time, right?
Yeah, not today. I mean, not in this first phase of the project, but yes.
Okay.
So if you could scroll down to section 4D, please. Yes, that's it. I'm sorry, wait. Yes, that's it. So the amendments here, and there's just one amendment above, is just to clarify that the city can use the net zero funds for any of the purposes identified at any time within the city council's discretion. And the 3 purposes are: the city can use it to purchase replenishment water, the city can use the funds for landscape turf removal, so retrofitting those lawns, or the city could use it to replace the leaking sewer mains throughout the city to ensure that there's no water loss in that way. So this just provides, these amendments provide the city council with the flexibility to allocate those resources as they see fit and that are in the best interest of the city. If you could scroll down to section 7A, please. There was some concern among the commissioners that the term of the agreement was too long, and so we were able to negotiate the term down to 7 years, and that 7 years is inclusive of the phase 2 proceedings, so the design review, tentative track map, application process review, all of that, pulling of the building permits, as well as construction. So all 3 of those components should be completed in those 7 years. And if the applicant wishes, or the developer wishes to extend the term of the agreement, before it was written that they need to go to the city manager, we were going to do it at the administrative level. Per the Planning Commission's desire, we've changed that to go to the city council. So there would be a formal, it would be at a formal city council meeting, and members of the community would have an opportunity to provide their input regarding any grant of an extension of the term. You can go to, yes.
They've agreed to this, is what you're saying.
They've agreed to all of these points.
Okay.
Section 8B, regarding minor modifications. There was some concern that the minor modifications were vague, or they were too broad. And so for that reason, we went back and forth on this. We decided that the minor modification process is worth maintaining in the agreement, that small modifications are necessary or may become necessary, but those small modifications will not include a modification in the date of performance of an obligation, so that was completely removed. And we've now tied the definition for minor modification to what's reflected in section 6.4 of the specific plan. And if the applicant can come forward, I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but I think is it a 20% I don't want to misstate it. If the applicant can
20,
speak to that modification definition.
That's correct, City Attorney. 20% is the threshold. So if there's modification of a standard 20% or less, that could happen at the administrative level. Above 20% deviation, that would not be a minor modification.
So that was the amendment that both the staff had proposed and the applicant agreed to.
Help me understand what the 20% represents.
Sure. So a very kind of classic example would be a 20% deviation in, say, a setback, where we need there's a unique site condition as we go into final design, and you would do a site-specific survey where we need on one side yard a little bit of relief. So if we needed 2 feet of relief and the standard was 10 feet, that would be 20%. And so anything 2 feet or less would be a minor mod. If we needed 3 or 4 feet, that would no longer be a minor modification.
And if you could also speak to what a minor modification cannot be.
Yeah, so a minor modification cannot be, for example, an increase in square footage, something really substantial design changes, major overhaul in terms of location of the utilities, really anything that you would think is really more of a substantive major design change, as opposed to those tweaks that always happen between conceptual level design and final level design.
And the specific plan provides examples of what can be amended. And so what's not included in the specific plan is going to be excluded from this definition.
Okay.
And Senior Planner Lynn, if you could scroll down to section 13A. So there was some concern that some of these force majeure provisions were broad and can be interpreted differently by the city or the applicant. And so to ensure that there wasn't an interpretation that was inconsistent with what the city understood, for 2 of these force majeure provisions, the first regarding a delay resulting from a local, state, or federal public health order, and the second being a delay resulting from a shortage of materials or supplies, that the determination of whether that delay constitutes a force majeure that would be a permitted delay of this agreement, meaning the agreement could be extended out further, that determination would need to be made by the city manager and cannot be made by the applicant. And those are the totality of the amendments to the development agreement at this time.
So on the force majeure, that would push back a deadline for performance, but it wouldn't allow something that's conditioned on something else happening to race ahead, right? So like the park has to be delivered by X time,
Right.
based on, before you can pull more things. If one moves back, they're both going to move back.
Right. The way, and I don't have the performance schedule up here, but the way the performance schedule is written, every action is contingent upon the prior action, and they're not set dates. So as a result, if one action is pushed back, all the other actions that come after would also be pushed back.
Okay. Because if there's force majeure that pushes back 3 months, I can live with that. But I just want to make sure that doesn't mean that, we said we'd deliver the park by whatever 20 houses, but we just happened to build 42 and we forgot to do the park. That's not okay. So as long as those move together, then that's good. And then there's, I forget the section number, but that talks about the bonding, and it references obligations up above, including the utilities. So that's the part to me that wasn't clear about whether that includes the offsite.
Offsite,
And
yes.
it should include the offsite.
I've noted that here, and I'll make sure that that's reflected in the next draft that comes before the Planning Commission. And that's it. Thank you, Mr. Planner.
Any questions about the development agreement?
No, it's good.
Some good progress made there. I guess now we will take public comment. We'll probably take public comment till 9 o'clock or so and then take a break. I would like to remind everybody that we will be allowing public comment for 3 minutes. And so we can go ahead and start with the cards.
Gary Hood, and then after that will be Alice Wichello.
Do we have a check of the score of the 12U game? 4-1, not us.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I am here for Nancy Beckham. She has surgery tomorrow, and so she asked me to read her letter. In reading her letter, I realized I couldn't read it in 3 minutes. So I broke it down so that you hear the basics. Nancy Beckham dated this July 6th. Also included are 2 letters, one from July 31st, 2020, and one from March 25th, 2022. The letters are from the Department of Fish and Wildlife to Vincent Gonzalez, Sierra Madre's Director of Planning and Community Preservation Department. Mrs. Beckman states that reports show a tremendously flawed EIR for the Meadows housing development impact on the wildlife. She states Sierra Madre has a wildlife sanctuary city since September 12, 1972. But now, where is the concern for the animals? There are at least 2 animals that are found in the meadows which are considered endangered. One is the California mountain lion. There are potentially 9 species of pallid bats, one of which is also considered endangered, the Townsend big-eared bat. The animals who live in Bailey Canyon Wilderness Park have never been assessed because Bailey Canyon was never part of the draft EIR. Crouch's bumblebee, named after the man who discovered the species, build their nests in abandoned gopher and snake holes. The bumblebees are endangered and almost extinct. In December of 2019, the project area was heavily sprayed with chemicals by the monastery, ostensibly to kill bumbleweeds. The question is, what did that spraying do to the bumblebees? With the bulldozing of the 20 acres and removing over 100 trees, I think Mrs. Beckman's letter brings up some serious concerns that need to be reviewed. So thank you for the opportunity to present this information, and I'll give you her letters now.
Thank you.
After Ms. Wichello will be Claire McLean.
Planning Commission, my name is Alice Wichello. I live at 471 Sierra Madre Boulevard. Thank you for listening to me. During the last couple of months, especially when I saw in the news the Laguna Niguel fire, where it was a lot of mansions, and it was a mansion development, and they were burning. You could see it on the TV. It made me look up over the past 10 years. And 10 years ago, the state passed strict new standards for homes built in high fire risk areas. In the Ventura foothills of Southern California, 4 of the 9 homes on Andorra Lane burned down in the Thomas fire. Almost no one expected it. After all, the homes were brand new. They were surrounded by dozens of other homes, and most importantly, they met the state's building codes for areas at heightened risk of wildfires. There was at least one agency that suspected homes in this area could burn, CAL FIRE. During these past 10 years, we have seen other mansion home developments burn when the fire is big enough and the winds are strong enough. And why is a mansion development being built in a high fire risk zone, Bailey Canyon? I guess we're never going to have a fire. Those families that are going to move in there, I don't know, it scares me because nobody is taking into account and nobody is thinking about what happens when a fire is big enough and strong enough and we say yes to this project, and what happens if it's big enough and strong enough and their lives, children, families lost in a fire. I just don't understand how we can just turn a blind eye to it. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Claire McLean and then Deb Sheridan.
I want to say thank you for showing up. I think in today's world that's really important, and I really do appreciate that you guys are showing up and taking an interest in this. My name is Claire McLean. I moved here about a year ago. I babysit my 1-year-old granddaughter, and what I do every night is walk up to Bailey Canyon because I can hear the sound of silence. But what I have noticed is there's not enough room up there right now. This is a dead-end situation. In Carter, where it comes out, I'm up there all the time, every night. 2 cars cannot pass on Carter. So what I'm hearing today is that Carter is going to be the driving force of whether this can happen or not. There has got to be an entrance and an exit. And they take away the parking for this so-called park they're going to have. Where are people going to park? Seriously, if you guys don't go up there and see the parking situation, it is out of control already, especially on Saturday and Sunday. So in the way that people are going to be able to enjoy this so-called park is to park on all the side streets and to take up all, when people park on Grove, you can only get 1 car down there. So I'm wondering, are you going to increase the size of Grove? But the size of Carter alone, when you come up, when you go north on Grove, you run into Bailey Canyon, you take a right, that portion as well is gonna have to be widened. And I am just blown away that Carter is not your first priority. You've got to figure out how in the world you're gonna get people in and out of there, especially in a fire situation. It is critical. I beg you to go up there. I beg you to sit there. I go up there for the sound of silence. I read in the EIR yesterday. Last night I sat up, I started reading it, and I ended up, all of a sudden it was 11:30. Noise from the construction is exempt between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. every day, except for Sundays and holidays, and they're exempt from 10 to 6. Now, if they can be there at 7, all these trucks, these dozers, everybody, think what's going to be happening between 6 and 7 in Sierra Madre, and what's going to be happening especially when kids are getting ready for school and when people are trying to take their kids to school. I walk up Sunnyside. I live by the library. I walk up Sunnyside and cut over on Fairview and then go up that way. And I just can't for the life of me figure out how this is going to happen and how it's going to happen successfully. It said there it would be like 3 years. What I came up here for was the fact that Sierra Madre was declared a habitat sanctuary, and what I'm really concerned about is the clear cutting. Clear cutting has added to, is our time up? It's a global crisis, and I have so much more to say, but please think about what I said. Please go up and visit Bailey Canyon.
Thank you.
Do it.
Deb Sheridan and then Nancy Shore-Peterson, or excuse me, Natalie Shore-Peterson.
Good evening, Commissioners. Deb Sheridan, Valley Vista Drive. This is a letter, or well, actually an email that was sent by Jane Song, the project manager of the Watershed Conservation Authority, to the City Council last August. Thank you for your commitment to serving the people of Sierra Madre. The community of Sierra Madre prides itself on being stewards of the San Gabriel Mountain foothills, and the commitment to safeguard Sierra Madre's character and natural resources is enshrined as a guiding principle of the city's general plan. Watershed Conservation Authority's mission is to expand the open space and recreational opportunities in the San Gabriel and Lower Los Angeles Rivers watershed area, consistent with the goals of flood protection, water supply, and groundwater recharge. It is in this spirit that I want to share a consideration for the Madre Dolorosa land, which is proposed as a site of a residential development. The development will be situated on the very last large parcel of land in the eastern San Gabriel Valley, San Gabriel foothills, which retains a connection between the canyons and the alluvial fan. Alluvial fans have particularly high rates of infiltration. There, water can sink deep into the ground and recharge aquifers. Keeping remaining recharge areas as undeveloped as possible is a critical part of protecting our region's watersheds. This land was ranked very high in conservation value in our agency's Foothills Open Space Acquisition Study due to its watershed value, adjacency to protected lands, potential for habitat restoration, and for public access. The opportunity to optimize the recharge potential on any remaining undeveloped alluvial fan land has the potential to benefit all users of the Raymond Basin far into the future. It may also serve as a buffer to absorb flows from the mountains above in an era of climate change uncertainty. If this land is covered by houses and roads, it would be prohibitive to regain all these functions in full. Please give full consideration to an alternative scenario to acquire the land for regional public benefit and to optimize its capacity to enhance biodiversity, aquifer recharge, as well as provide flood control. There are various funding opportunities for the purchase and management of conservation land, and we would be happy to provide information. Thank you for your time. And as we have stated in the past, she was not allowed to speak, and nobody from the Watershed Conservation Authority was allowed to speak before the city council or before you. And that makes me distraught. But also, I wanted to mention to you that my water seems to be turning brown again, just like when our wells ran dry and we had to import our water, and it was horrible. And I did get my pipes changed, so that's not the problem, but we keep hearing there is no water to be had. Thank you. Thank you, as always, for your time.
Thank you.
Natalie Shore-Peterson, and then Jessica Sarber.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Natalie Shore-Peterson, and I'm here speaking on behalf of my mother at 501 Crestvale Drive. Her property directly abuts the southeast border of the proposed project. And my comments are largely in response to the questions the Commissioner had for us at the June 2nd meeting. Unfortunately, we were not able to attend. Regarding whether the resident would like a slump wall, berm, and or trees blocking the existing view, the answer is no. Our family does not want the view blocked. The existing view is integral to the enjoyment and value of our mother's home, which we've said in the past. And to date, the developer has not offered any alternatives to its proposal, which would infringe upon our mother's privacy, peace, and view. Secondly, the drawings presented by the developer on June 20th and possibly even this evening do not accurately depict existing structures and measurements. Nothing is proportional. Also, the developer's rendering of proposed landscaping at 501 Crestvale contains elements based on an inaccurate scale and completely omits the utilities supporting the entire development, which would be sited under a proposed berm, trees, and parking lot. These elements would block the view. There are better options. Lastly, there appears to be no mention in the specific plan or the EIR of any civil engineering study addressing the existing retaining wall along the southern border where the developer proposes to locate underground utilities and above-ground structures. We are concerned about the added weight and force on the wall during and after construction. The developer estimates its plan will subject our family to 3 to 4 years of digging, trenching, and laying pipes and cables 12 feet from our home and 9 feet from our roof line. The city should reject this intrusive design, require the developer to relocate this infrastructure away from the edge of our property to the edge of any new houses, and ensure an engineering study is done. This would protect existing properties, any new development, and the city, which will be responsible for the parkland. Our previous requests remain the same: relocate the utilities away from the existing residence home, relocate the proposed walking path to the southern edge of the proposed houses, remove the children's playground or relocate it closer to the development, remove the unnecessary parking lot. The proposed residential and off-street parking accommodates more than 200 vehicles. There are other parking solutions that do not require construction and maintenance of a parking lot within approximately 30 feet of our roof line. As far as the conceptual plan views and plan figures, they must be accurate. These renderings, representations, and measurements reflect a deficient working knowledge of the property and its surroundings. They also raise serious questions about the entire proposed development. Thank you for considering the rights of the existing residents and recognizing the detrimental impacts of the proposed plan on our properties along the southeastern border of the Madre de la Rosa grounds. And thank you for your comments also, Commissioner Dallas. I wouldn't be opposed to using the word shall regarding the parkland, but I would also appreciate shall not relative to certain elements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica Sarber, and then Russ Guinea.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jessica Sarber. I am one of the daughters of Queenie Shore, the resident and owner at 501 Crestvale Drive. I'm also a native daughter of Sierra Madre and was born at St. Luke's, lived here all my life until I moved away. In 1973, my family, my parents moved from Montecito and Mountain Trail to get away from the canyon traffic on Mountain Trail, the noise, and to obtain a view and peaceful environment at the very end of Crestvale Drive. The diagrams that I have given you are excerpts from the utilities from the specific plan. The point of showing this is to show how many utilities come and converge at 501 Crestvale Drive. I don't need to explain more, but the fact that there is severe impact at this location can be seen in these diagrams. As requested by my sister, we are asking for the utilities to be pushed back to as far away from our residents as is possible, as they are a severe impact on the residents, her well-being, and the environment. On the next page, the highly conceptualized images used to show the berm are incredibly inaccurate. There's a list of inaccuracies at 501 Crestvale Drive, and included is an actual photo of what 501 Crestvale Drive really looks like. It's completely different. Particularly, they mentioned the fence along the property, and it's actually a cinder block wall. Nobody has ever determined whether it can retain the kind of construction and infrastructure proposed. On the next page is listed 502 Crestvale Drive, and I only bring it up because, once again, it's highly inaccurate. And where there are trees and a berm, there's actually a proposed widening of Carter Drive onto the property. So our request, as per what my sister had just said, is that whenever showing diagrams, is that we actually include accuracy in all the pictures, because the commission cannot possibly vote on something that is highly inaccurate. I'd like to address a few other items. One was the question of who designs the park. What we've heard from the developers that the park is designed by the commission and by the city and by the Madre de la Rosa. But in fact, the city has said it's designed by the Madre de la Rosa and the developer, and then the Madre de la Rosa has said it's designed by the city. So who actually designs this is really in question. And we have been unable to secure any kind of information in regards to that. There are other items that I can certainly write about, but I am hoping that the commissioners will take into consideration that there are still significant changes required in order to protect the residents who have been here, like my mother, for 60 years, who've been paying their taxes, because that's part of the city staff's hopeful projection, is that when they're talking with the developer, they will also take into consideration the actual property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Russ Guinea, and then Susan Newhausen.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Russ Guinea. I live on West Orange Grove Avenue near Lima. And I want to thank you for your work. I know this is hard and difficult, and you're asking great questions, and you're spending a lot of your own time doing it. So as a citizen of our town, thank you for your volunteer time, and thank you for your efforts on behalf of all of us. I have a number of concerns about this project, not the least of which is the traffic. The EIR may say that the traffic is insignificant, or the draft EIR, but I walk Sunnyside, Lima, Carter, all the streets in between with my dogs. I watch kids playing in the street. I watch kids on bicycles. And I think traffic is an issue that has not been fully addressed. I think the parking is an issue that hasn't been fully addressed. And I think these areas need to have more review. I'm also concerned about the water issue. I had the good fortune this spring to travel to Nevada, Arizona, Utah. I saw Lake Powell. I saw Lake Mead. Last month I was in Northern California. I saw Lake Shasta. You've seen all these on TV. You've seen the headlines. Great Salt Lake, drying up. So we're in a crisis on water here. And to say that the water will simply be offset with other improvements or future purchases is really not acceptable. We are in a crisis, and to be building more homes and adding when we don't have water is just doesn't make sense. So again, I thank you for your work, and I thank you for the real detail that you're going into on this, and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Newhausen, and then Filippo Finara.
Yes, Susan Newhausen, top of Grove Street. Congratulations, I think, Chair Dennison and Vice Chair Hudd. So I had some other prepared remarks, but I appreciate the presentation by New Urban West. I'm really glad to hear that the specific plan will be modified prior to the commissioners voting. I want to point out that given that New Urban West can sell out and walk away, a new developer can interpret the plan in whatever way they see fit. Therefore, the specific plan does need to be truly specific, as you all have been discussing. And I'd also like to request that you request a two-dimensional drawing of a full street of houses and what that will look like with the 5 feet side setbacks and the 6 foot high concrete wall between the properties. Mr. Frankel still did not provide examples of what other projects look like. He really just showed some single houses, and that's not really the same to get an idea of what the scope of it looks like. And it's been pointed out, the house elevations and renditions shown do not appear to be what is actually will be built. For one thing, the drawings don't show garages that are set back an additional 5 feet from the street, as it states in the specific plan. Some of the same drawings were shown as last time. For example, slides 10 through 13 show a house. It was described as an interior square footage of 3,900 square feet with a 3-car garage, yet the drawing was a 2-car garage. So the 3,900 square foot house was actually a 4,750 square foot house. So, Mr. Frankel said the new maximum would be 3,750 square feet. I'm hoping that's the total square footage, again, not the interior. And that would suggest that the house would be 2,850 square feet interior, and so I'm just trying to figure out if their math is correct, because it didn't seem like it was last time. So even if it's truly 3,750 square feet, that's still 76% larger than code for the smaller lots, which to me, you know, is excessive. I could understand a 10 or 20%, but that's just much higher than one would anticipate. And I had some other remarks, but I do want to point, I'm a little, it came up, the Carter expansion, and the question was asked. So I don't know how the EIR can be approved prior to the determination of the county about selling the land to the city for Carter. Carter's part of the EIR. I mean, that's part and parcel of the EIR, so how can you say approve it before we know what's part of the EIR? It makes no sense. And then what if the county says no? What does that do to the whole project? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Filippo Finara, and then Alex Arietta.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Filippo Finara. I've been a retreatant at Madre the last 25 years. I currently serve as its chair. As such, the city of Sierra Madre is close to my heart. Like everyone who cares about this city, I appreciate the diligence this commission has exhibited in the review of the Meadows plan. I've not agreed on every direction you've taken, but it's obvious you've taken responsibility seriously in pursuit of a plan you can recommend positively to the city council. Before that happens, of course, I would like to address the opposition speakers who would, if allowed, deprive me of a voice before you, because while the institution I care so much about is located in Sierra Madre, my residence is not. I live in Pasadena. As board chair, though, I represent all the thousands of supporters of Madre de la Rosa, including those residents of Sierra Madre, past and present. They've entrusted the board to uphold its mission to support its ministry now and into the future. I'm here to speak on their behalf. All who work for Madre de la Rosa and all who volunteer for it represent the voice of one of Sierra Madre's most established and long-term property owners. Because we will be operating next to the Meadows project for decades to come, we have an interest in seeing a plan move forward that addresses our concerns and is a positive addition to the city. That gives us every right to address Sierra Madre's leadership regarding this plan, and our comments should have equal weight. You have been thorough in your review of the plan and have represented the city well. New Urban West and Madre de la Rosa have been responsive to your suggestions, proposing solutions that are significant, fair, and effective. Your work on this project continues, and hopefully it'll move on to the City Council for their approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alex Arietta, and then Jean Warlick.
Good evening, Commissioners. And again, I also want to say thank you very much for your commitment to this project and the analytical questions you're asking. They're very thoughtful, and we appreciate it very much. What I've distributed to you is an analysis that was done by Henry Leung, who lives at 411 North Sunnyside. He cannot be here this evening. And one thing the developer and Mr. Franco have spoken about this evening is about the square footage of the homes that are proposed to be an average of 3,800 square feet, which is certainly appreciated from the last meeting of 4,700 square feet potential. But nonetheless, the analysis that you have before you shows that Henry did an analysis of homes within 300 square feet of the proposed project on the streets of Sierra Keys, Crestvale, Grove, Carter, Edgeview, Sunnyside, and Gatewood. And he looked at 50 homes in this 300 square feet area. The square footage average was 2,008 square feet, and the median was 1,900 square feet. And only 5 of the 50 homes that were analyzed were 2-story. Now I want you to compare and contrast that to what was shared tonight. Tonight what was shared was that the homes on average could be up to 3,800 square feet, and 75% of them could be 2-story. Very different, and it's not at all consistent with what existing communities look like in the immediate surrounding area, which would be mostly impacted. That has to be a material consideration that you look at as you review this project. It is just not consistent. And one thing that was shared by the monastery on their FAQs when this project was started, and they are still posted to this day, was that they had pledged to be consistent with an appropriate project for Sierra Madre in size and scope of the homes. And they would be a logical extension of what existing communities look like. This is not a logical extension of what the surrounding communities look like. It is far from that, and it is very concerning. Second point I wanted to make was around, so I ask you to please don't back down when you're looking at the house sizes and on the lot sizes as you consider this project. Second point is around the EIR. Important point made about the EIR is not even close to be approved until the impact of Carter is looked at, until traffic is looked at more closely, and until the fire impact is looked at more closely. Those are 3 hugely significant areas that really received minimal investment in the EIR analysis. So I ask that you please all consider that and look at that very closely. If I had more time, I'd talk about the water impact. The last point is it's estimated that there will be 100,000 gallons spent just during construction to build each home. That's 42 million. That's 4.2 million gallons. Another 750,000 gallons to build the roads. That's 5 million gallons of water just during construction phase. Okay, however long that lasts. So in light of the fact that we're in a drought, it's also very concerning. Thank you very much again for your time.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Alex? On this chart you gave us the building size, is this from the counties? Are these the county numbers?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Jean Warlick, and then Father Michael Higgins.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jean Warlick, and I have, for the past 17 years, been on the staff at Madre de la Rosa. And even though I don't live in the city of Sierra Madre, I am very happy that my work at Madre de la Rosa has given me the opportunity to be part of this city. This evening, though, I would like to address the open space parcel behind the retreat center and the importance of that space to the retreat experience. Retreatants have been coming to Madre de la Rosa since the first retreat in 1926, which is almost 100 years ago, because they are seeking a quiet, peaceful environment in our sacred space that enables them to experience God's presence and to grow spiritually. You may think of our chapel, our Stations of the Cross, and our gardens, excuse me, as our quiet and meditative places, but just as important are the retreatants' rooms where they stay and where they often spend considerable time in prayer and contemplation. More than half of the rooms in the retreat center face the mountain. So we must maintain control of that land we own behind and above the retreat center to protect the tranquility that our retreatants seek. So that is why it's so important for us to retain ownership of the open space parcels with a conservation easement. All of us at Madre de la Rosa want to make sure that for future decades, our retreatants will be able to draw close to God in the quiet, sacred setting of Madre de la Rosa. I hope this helps you a little bit to understand why we need to maintain ownership of the open space and why we need to protect it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Father Michael Higgins, and then Tricia Searcy.
Good evening, Commissioners. I am Father Michael Higgins, and I reside at 700 North Sunnyside Avenue in Sierra Madre, the Madre de la Rosa Passionist Retreat Center. It has been very interesting for me to follow the process of this commission in its review of the plan for the meadows at Bailey Canyon. Your scrutiny and attention to detail is impressive. You speak well of your commitment to this city we all love so much. However, speaking for myself, I must say that the ongoing discussion regarding the ownership of our open space parcels has been frustrating. I feel we have been very generous with our open space concessions and our donation of more than 3 acres of very valuable and buildable land for a new city park. And I believe we should not agree to change in the so-called orange area zoning from institutional to open space. Be that as it may, we need to resolve this matter, and the city has worked diligently with us to find a solution that is acceptable to the province. I'm therefore here tonight to express the Passionist Province's support of the proposed new development agreement language covering the orange area. Under this new language, the orange area will be rezoned as open space and will be treated like all other open space in the city. In other words, habitable structures will not be allowed, but non-habitable structures that are accessory to this open space purpose are. For us, that means we could have a prayer trail on the property and could add an altar or an arbor or some other non-habitable structure that is accessory to the prayer trail, in the same way that a trail through open space elsewhere in the city can have a kiosk or rest area. I ask you to view our acceptance of this as a significant concession. The province shares my view that it would be much better for us to have the parcel keep its institutional zoning. But we are prepared to accept the proposed new development agreement language as drafted if it helps the Meadows plan to move forward expeditiously from the Planning Commission with a positive recommendation to the City Council. Of course, our agreement is contingent on city approval of the Meadows plan and would be made moot should the ballot initiative opposing the Meadows pass and become law. So thank you for your attention, and thank you for your very hard and meticulous work.
Thank you.
Tricia Searcy, and then Christine Lowe.
Good evening, Tricia Searcy, 734 Fairview Avenue. Yes, thank you for all the work that you've been doing on this. It's heartening to see. The few things I wanted to mention today relate to the off-site plan. I think this is currently still a black hole, and we seem to be in a catch-22 because my understanding is that the county, as Mr. Frankel said, won't grant this right without an EIR that's approved. I don't see how we can approve an EIR without understanding whether or not Carter is going to be used and how it's going to be used. We don't know if it's going to be allowed at all. We don't know if it will be used for just egress, for ingress and egress. These are things that I feel need to be established before a specific plan could be approved. And through a public records request, I learned at some point that there was negotiations going back and forth between the city and the county. And my understanding there was that the county had said to the city, okay, submit us, give us a proposal. What is it, the right of way, what are the dimensions, and an offer, a monetary offer, and we'll get back to you. I don't know what happened to that, but now I understand that it's the developer that's talking to the county. So I think that needs to be clarified so that that can be reviewed, because right now the off-site plan can't be reviewed because we don't really have an off-site plan. And it's a significant part of the project that I think needs to be reviewed. The part that was put in to the DEIR didn't get actually reviewed in the EIR, and it was not noticed. The agencies, so for example, Department of Fish and Wildlife, submitted comments to the draft EIR and mentioned the connection to Bailey Canyon, and they wanted that to be reviewed. That was never done. I'm sure they would also have comments on this if they were noticed. The other thing is that the permissiveness of the specific plan still exists. There are still inaccuracies, there are still inconsistencies, and I don't see how the specific plan can be addressed while it's still so unspecific. And I'm going to use water again as an example. The net zero concept is not the EPA concept, it's just a made-up concept, and nothing that they put forth, they give up 3 options. They're just throwing them out there. They said you can try any of these 3, but they're making no connection between trying that and actually attaining it. And if they don't attain it, there is no consequence to them under the development agreement or under the specific plan. So I feel like these kinds of things, the Carter Plan, the EIR, which also has significant holes because, as Mig pointed out, the independent reviewer, the EIR is circular. It uses its own guidelines. It says the specific plan says, well, we are consistent with our own guidelines instead of using outside regulations. So I would also hope that this commission would consider requiring independent reviewer to review the draft EIR and the final EIR that were actually circulated. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Lowe, if you wouldn't mind, I think we'll take a quick break and then return refreshed to hear your comments.
Sure.
But before we do that, 8 to 5 Sierra Madre for those of you following.
I will share with you, we only have 3 more, if you want to.
Oh, we only have 3 more, and then we'll go into deliberation. Is that okay? Can people wait for 3 more comments?
Sure.
All right, I guess we're going to change plans here, and there's 3 more cards listed, so we'll just keep on. Ms. Lowe.
All right. Hello, my name is Christine Lowe. I live at 138 Esperanza in Sierra Madre. Congratulations, Commissioner Dennison, and I greatly appreciate all the hard work all of you commissioners have invested in Sierra Madre. It is up to you to assure our building plans are copacetic with maintaining our hometown feel. I appreciate the requests you have made to this project, and I appreciate the accommodations that the applicants have been making. We now need to remove the McMansion or mansion terminology. According to Realtor.com, a mansion is 8,000 square feet or more. These homes are an average of 3,500 square feet, which fits into our current building codes. Regarding safety, with 2 egress exits and with only 42 homes, in terms of evacuations, this would be very safe. In terms of fire safety, we have to remember that this property that is being questioned to be built upon is lower than both the open space, lower than the actual monastery, lower than the area where there are high trees, and currently there's dry brush that is an open land which fire runs with. I'm a retired firefighter, so I know that, on lots of brush fires. So currently that's actually much more of a fire hazard the way it sits right now today. If this project is not approved, this is still private property. Construction can still happen. Under current codes, such as a school could be built, some other building similar to that, an institution such as a convalescent home, which would have a huge negative impact, especially with water usage, less open space conservancy, and non-energy efficient building. If residential building is changed and coded here, this project is not approved, then all of these accommodations go away that we have seen tonight and through this development. Without sewage, plumbing, and drainage and other utilities being consistent, you would have some houses who might be on the same sewage system, might not. Different sewage lines would have to be connected at different times, including plumbing. It wouldn't be consistent, and it wouldn't be as efficient. We give up to 3 acres of our hometown use if this project doesn't go through. That would be a city park that we all get to use. And overall, this project uses 1.5% of our city water. Compare that to what happens if you put one house, 3,500 square feet or less, on 2 acres. That would be more water usage than the whole project put together, including the park. This project is the most beneficial to our town and us as citizens. I want to express my support in your work in maintaining our hometown feel and all the work you're putting towards planning new buildings in our city. And as a lifelong Sierra Madrean who grew up to the monastery and has served our citizens on every block of this town, I support this project because it benefits our city and our residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Allison Snow and then Scott Oliver.
I knew that was going to happen.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you very much. My name is Allison Snow, and I am a lifelong resident of Sierra Madre, and I'm also the president of the Sierra Madre Environmental Action Council, whose primary area of concern and action has been Bailey Canyon Park, Wilderness Park. For over 20 years, I personally have led volunteer efforts to improve and maintain Bailey Canyon Park and led nature awareness walks for Sierra Madre school children. I am driven to speak again this evening on behalf of Bailey Canyon Park and Canyon, which I consider one of Sierra Madre's great assets and is being dealt a very short shrift by all parties interested in the development. Bailey Canyon Park is the last of its kind when it comes to wildland open space in this corner of the monstrous LA metropolis, and needs and deserves all the attention and preservation it can receive, because once intruded upon, it will never return. The EIR for the Meadows development has not ever included an analysis of the negative impact of the widening of Carter Avenue that is considered necessary for the development to go forward. At least 10 mature trees and a large number of mature native shrubs that line and decorate the south boundary of the park will be removed, and thus also a visual barrier appreciated by the southern residential neighbors and the persons in the park seeking an experience of separation from urban noise and crowding. To widen Carter Avenue and provide a proposed non-essential sidewalk, where basically none exists on West Carter Avenue, will have a serious ripple effect on the parking lot inside the park. Currently, parking for park and hiker use is a challenge, and I will bet my bottom dollar that the parking provided inside the park will be pushed northward and into the primary native plant knoll that was the seed and foundation for the creation of Bailey Canyon Park over 50 years ago. Please don't forget this park was the brain and heart child of Sierra Madre citizens, a Girl Scout troop no less, who saw the need and did almost all the work to research, plant, maintain, and improve the park and public amenities for the past 50 years. Handicapped accessibility code requirements and city code parking lot requirements could basically obliterate the rustic nature of the street frontage entrance drive and parking area by 100 feet north. All planting, current hardscape, and park structures will be compromised. I'm asking for the Planning Commission to defer action on this application until the residents have an opportunity to review an engineered plan of the street widening and resulting required changes to Bailey Canyon Park. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Scott Oliver and then Robert Jurdy.
Hi, I'm Scott Oliver, 144 West Carter Avenue. First thing I want to say is at the beginning of the meeting, when the commissioner brought up the fact that all of the concerns that were discussed previously were minimized down to a presentation and there was no documentation, I found that really unprofessional and disrespectful to you, the commission, and to us, the community, that if I was trying to push a project through of this size, I would have darn well made sure that I was presenting the commission with everything they needed, wanted, and for the community to be able to see what they were trying to do to mitigate the issues we've been talking about ad nauseum. So that was a big deal to me. Second thing, and this is, you know, it's just a repeat. I live on Carter. I've got a big porch and I sit there. I have a beautiful view of the mountains thanks to a very catastrophic windstorm. Maybe those of you who were here in December of 2011, it was devastating. It was catastrophic. We lost power for 5 days. It made a note in my mind that I went out and bought generators, and every time the wind kicks up, I don't sleep very well. But I want you all to kind of consider things that have already happened in this town and happened throughout Southern California. Fire, yes. Fire is a big deal in California. We're going to live with fire for the rest of all of our lives. It happens, and it happens on the outside of communities because of different ways ignition does occur. Homelessness is also an issue. We know we have homeless that try to encroach in the wilderness areas because it's easy and free for them to live. But we also have to realize they can provide ignition. Also development, more multiple ignitions. Now, if you look at communities like Porter Ranch, Thousand Oaks, Oak Hills, if you remember the shooting at the Cowboy Bar in Thousand Oaks, that night the fire started in Simi Valley. And because of the high winds, maybe you all remember this, it spread so quickly through Malibu into the Oak Hills section, which are very affluent, beautiful, stucco, primarily stucco, Spanish adobe, hard tile roofs. They burned fast, quick. Nothing was survived. You look at Santa Rosa, the town, people died in their beds. Why? High winds, fast-moving firestorm. They never had a chance. Same thing happened in Paradise. And what I'm trying to get you and everyone else to consider, you look at Carter, we have traffic problems now on Carter. To slough it off that Carter is going to be a secondary egress and ingress for that community, and for that matter, the communities that exist now, Sierra Meadows, Hermosa, North Auburn, all of these streets exit. Think of a fast-moving firestorm, fast, really fast, just like the winds we've had, and you know we've had them. Think of a fire and everybody trying to get away. It would lock the streets, and it would be a literally run-for-your-lives situation, and we're going to see it on the news, and who knows how many people could perish. It may not be in Sierra Madre, it may be Porter Ranch or La Cañada or La Quincena or Simi Valley, but it's going to happen because it's climate change, overdevelopment, and disregard for what's in front of us, staring at us. I
Thank you,
urge
Mr.
to
Oliver.
consider that. I urge you to please do what you're doing. You're protecting us. You're our guardians. Please, guardian on.
Robert Jurdy.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to talk again about the conservancy of the hillsides, because no one seems to be talking about what's in the city's best interest. There seems to be some rewriting of history here, because the MOU, which was already agreed to, says that one of the concessions is they will dedicate to the city open space hillside land north of the existing retreat center. I understand that the lower 10 acres is, questionable as to was that included in the original amount? And I would say leave that institutional if they want it institutional. I don't think it matters if that's open space or not. But the upper two lots should be given to the city as was originally agreed to in the MOU. I know they have privacy concerns. Across 2/3 of the retreat center, it's already Sierra Madre land up there when you get 500 feet up, where those two lots are. So there's really no expectation of privacy, even though no one goes up there, so I don't see why privacy is an issue for those two lots. But the city owning those lots would allow the city to meet the goals and objectives of the general plan, and I've said this before, of increasing parkland. It would give the city the option of expanding the Bailey Canyon Wilderness area across Sierra Madre and into Pasadena, meeting another goal and objective of building that corridor across the top of the hillsides. So I'd still like to see the city get those. I don't see why that's being given up at this point when it was already agreed to. So I don't know. I'm not sure where that fell apart. I've asked the city manager, and I haven't heard back on how that got changed somewhere between the draft EIR and the final EIR. But since this is already agreed to, I'm not sure why we're giving that up, unless we're getting something else in return for that. But I haven't seen anything in that case. But I don't think privacy is really an issue because it's unlikely anyone is actually going to go up there. But 500 feet away should be sufficient to have privacy. That's almost 2 football fields away. So, thank you.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and take a 4-minute break after we get a quick update on the scores. Yes! Congratulations, Sierra Madre Majors Little League, or 12U. So we'll take a 4-minute break and then return, and anybody who still has comments will hear, and then we will go into deliberation.
and they came today. Got very public speaking.
I was here for 5 minutes.
Wait for city attorney? No. All right, we will go ahead and reconvene here.
You need this.
All right, we will resume with public comment. If there is anybody who has not spoken on tonight's agenda item and they would like to, now is the time. Hearing none, I will bring this matter back to the commission for deliberation.
Where are we?
I have one request. Can we get a copy of the PowerPoint that the applicant presented? I think that would be very helpful. I think there was a lot of new information in that, and it will help us look at things in the future.
Chair, if I may, one issue that was raised during public comment that I don't think was ever addressed by city staff or the applicant was the design of the park. So the design of the park, it's my understanding that the park will be designed by the applicant with feedback from the Community Services Commission. I will confirm that point and present at your next meeting.
All right, great.
I've got a question. At what point do the neighbors get input on that?
So at the Community Services Commission meeting will be a public meeting, just like the Planning Commission meeting, and at that point they can provide public comment and their input regarding the design of the park.
And the diagram that, or the park layout that was shown to us today with just parking for handicap and loading, which I think it at least partially addresses some of the neighbors' concerns about not having the parking right next to their house, which I think is a big improvement. And I'm assuming that the handicap is required to be there by ADA law. But is that like something that then is going to be in the specific plan that can't be changed, or is that something that could be modified later? I guess it goes back to the same issue of, you know, what are we saying is definitely going to be there and what is open to further revision later?
The parking spaces, if included in the specific plan, will not change.
Okay.
Good. I'm going to ask one more since we're talking to legal. This supposed catch-20 or possible catch-22 on the widening of Carter and the, county wants the EIR approved first. What's the legal process? Is that possible? I mean, I look at it from our side. We'd be approving one thing. Okay, we'll see you when you guys get that figured out, because we're not going to give you a specific plan or any other or a service, or management agreement or a development agreement until we know what the status of Carter is. Correct?
Yeah, this is one of the challenging issues. What comes first?
Okay.
It seems like the county, and I'm getting this secondhand. I haven't corresponded directly with the county, so everything I'm saying is hearsay. But it seems like the county isn't willing to begin the process of considering the road expansion until they have a certified EIR from the city. So what I could do is I could follow up directly with the county and provide a report back, but I don't know that I'm going to get different information.
Well, procedurally, then, could we approve something tentative? Because our job is to send something to the city council.
Right.
Could we just condition it somehow?
Right. I mean, that's why I think you're talking about it makes sense, is that the approval of the thing, one of the conditions, and that's why I was asking about the timing, is that Carter is widened. And if the county says no, please tell us what happened. I assume then the applicant will have to come back and say, we can't comply with a specific plan, so, what should we do?
The struggle would be this. While we can condition the tentative track, so in the second phase, we can definitely include this as a condition. But in this first phase, we can't. Because if the general plan and zoning code are amended and that's approved by the city council, and then for whatever reason later on in the process we find out that the road widening won't happen because the county doesn't grant it, we can't then go back and somehow automatically take away that zone change and can convert it back to institutional. Case law doesn't allow that.
But we could deny the track map.
But you could deny that. So in the second phase of this, you can include. I'm just saying in this first phase, it's difficult.
But it doesn't matter to me whether they do a residential development or an institutional development. You're going to have the same issue. So if we catch that at the track map stage for residential, I mean, it would be like catching it at the master plan stage for institutional. Either way, we're going to have to catch it there, and it's going to be an issue any kind of development, right?
And that is, if the commission wants, that is something we can include in the development agreement to make sure that is that's something that's going to be conditioned in the tentative track map approval process.
Seems to be a big tripping point.
Mm-hmm.
I guess one follow-up I have on that, and I'm still trying to digest how this works, but then REIR is the environmental clearance for the sale of the property by the county? Or does the county not have to comply with CEQA to sell the property?
No, I still think the county has to comply with CEQA.
Because if the county has to comply with CEQA and REIR is that compliance, and we're showing the widening of Carter, but not the combining of the access road and the sort of north-south part of Carter, that means that's not going to happen. I mean, because the county's not going to do a separate, I wouldn't think they would need an EIR for that, but the county's probably not going to want to mess with CEQA compliance just to sell some extra property. And I don't know if the applicant has insight on this either. But.
So, Commissioner Hudd, I mean, I can't speculate as to what the county may or may not do. I do know, after having conversations with them, that the granting of right-of-way for the road widening and the sidewalk, that is very common. That is typical in the county. And so we would be more than happy to be conditioned to complete that improvement. We are committed to doing that. We understand that that is critical. Two other points I want to make is that after coordinating with the Sierra Madre Fire Department, 2 points of access here is not required in order to serve the project, meaning the project could safely be served from both a vehicular circulation and an evacuation standpoint with 1 point of access. We understand that 2 is better than 1, but as you look at the actual traffic generation, the trips generated, and from the standpoint of a safe evacuation, it could be done on 1 point of access. So we're committed to making the improvements and bonding for them as well. We understand that that's important, and we'd be happy to do that. But I can't say necessarily what the county will do, but I do know after speaking with them that they had no objection generally to the acquisition of right-of-way to add a sidewalk and to make it safer for vehicles.
Anything else you wanted to?
No, I don't have any more legal questions. But yeah, my notes, no, I'm good. Go ahead. Unless you want to.
Did you have anything, Peggy?
I do. So let's say this water situation gets really critical, like it looks like, and we have a building moratorium because of it. Would the building moratorium affect the development?
Yes, it would. So it depends on when the building moratorium goes into effect. So if the building moratorium goes into effect before building permits are pulled, then yes, projects can't go forward. If a building moratorium because of a water shortage happens after building permits are pulled, then they have their entitlements and they'll proceed with the project.
Okay, it sounds like they're not going to pull all 42 at once, though, so it would only affect the ones that were pulled.
Correct.
Or it wouldn't affect the ones that were pulled, it would only affect the ones that weren't pulled yet.
Correct.
But the moratorium is a function of the city council.
Also correct.
But because as we have it now, it's not in our purview, but it would be the city council's decision, which is totally out of our hands.
Now it's not only the city council's decision. The city council would have to make that decision, and then that decision would go to HCD for review, and only after HCD approves the moratorium would it take effect. So the state also has to approve the moratorium now.
And that would also be force majeure under the development agreement to
Correct.
extend the term.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, I mean, I really want to see the revised specific plan because, you know, the devil's in the details. But I very much appreciate the revisions that the applicant has proposed tonight. And I think they go a long way to addressing the concerns that I had and I think other commissioners had. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing that and seeing how we can, you know, get back on track with reviewing the project. I think that the Carter timing and bonding and conditioning is a really important item, as we discussed. I also think the water retention, I'd like to see 100% water retention of the regular flows. I mean, I understand you can't do, you know, a 100-year flood, but it looked to me in the diagrams in the existing specific plan, it's about a third to a half that goes down the west, and maybe it's 80%, somewhere in there. But it seems like it should be 100% that's captured. So I'd like to see that as well. With regard to the easement and the preservation of open space, there's a lot of different issues going on there. With regard to the two lots that are up north, the MOU says they should be dedicated to the city, but it's my understanding the city doesn't want them. So it's not that the applicant is changing their mind and pulling them back, it's that the city's saying they don't want them. So if you can talk to the city manager or whomever, and they can change their mind, fine, but that's not a decision we make. We just follow direction on that. As far as the other parcel, the part that's the sort of northern third of the main monastery part, I very much appreciate the Passionists agreeing to change the zoning on that. I never meant that they shouldn't be able to use the land or own the land. That should never be dedicated to the city. I don't think anyone's talking about that. So I just want to clarify that point. And, you know, using it for Stations of the Cross or other retreat purposes is perfectly fine. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Commissioner Hutt, if I could clarify one of those points. Regarding ownership of the open space lots, it is true, Mr. Jurdy spoke a public comment about that. It is true that initially I think the idea was, and I was involved in those negotiations, that the property was going to, those two lots were going to be deeded to the city. And that MOU was a guiding document. That was intended to guide the development agreement before you. At some point during the MOU and this development agreement, and this is already a number of years back, with this involves the prior city manager. The directors got together. I was present. The city manager was there too, and they talked about, well, what is deeding these two parcels to the city look like? And it was decided at that time that instead of deeding it to the city and having any kind of maintenance issue arise or having any kind of liability issue arise, at the time it was decided among the directors that let the Madre Rosa keep it, and if the issue is development at the site, let's prevent development by having a conservation easement. And initially the idea was not for the city to have that conservation easement, but to have the Sierra Madre Mountains Conservancy have that easement. But as you saw in the letter that they submitted, they won't take the easement unless the city owns the parcel, and they haven't explained to me why that's the case, because they can, there's no legal, to my knowledge, no legal barrier preventing the Sierra Madre Mountains Conservancy from taking that easement in their favor, but they've refused in writing, and I'm not sure why. So that's where we stand. That's the procedural history of this. Happy to answer any questions if that wasn't clear.
I think that, you know, obviously the dedication or accepting dedication is that's a city council decision to make that goes beyond land use planning. So if the city council decides that's the right thing to do, then fine. I think, you know, having that option on those other two is up to them. I don't think there should be any plans to require dedication of the closer in parcel. And I do think if we don't have dedication, having a conservation easement over the westernmost parcel is really important, because that's county land, not city land. So even though the one property we currently have zoned open space, which means it's not going to be developed, the county could theoretically change the zoning and allow who knows what. So having a conservation easement over that is, at a minimum, is important.
My only comment on this in the packet about agreeing with the passion is it goes to some things I know about other conservancies, which are, I have a friend who donated a large piece of land to a conservancy, and unfortunately he had an easement through that conservancy, and they treated, and they, as far as I know, continue to treat him shabbily. And so it was almost like they got it on a ruse, and even though he did them a big favor. So I know this doesn't occur with these people, but one of the unintended consequences is I keep thinking, it's like, well, you put this out there and they don't own it, then people start traipsing through it, and then they start making claims as if they kind of do, right? And when they try and say, well, wait, this is open space and the city owns it, then you try to get the city to enforce it. And you know, there's cases in other places where, like, the Forest Service has an easement on private property through ranch land, the ranch landers, you know, block the easement, and then there's a big confrontation, and then the local law enforcement says, well, we're not going to bother with it, so the locals just say, don't go there, they'll, you know, show up with guns, right? So I'm just thinking unintended consequences, and I think private ownership, the Passionists have been very generous with with what they're giving, and I think what you're saying speaks to that. I have some demons that I know have gone the wrong way, and I don't, not suspecting people of trying to do anything underhanded, but you know, you never know who's going to show up. And I think they should have control over their destiny and their property, and there sounds like they're willing to do that. Sorry.
Commissioner Dallas, you have anything else? Commissioner Spears?
I greatly appreciate the presentation tonight. It filled in a lot of missing elements, and it addressed a lot of elements that the commission brought up. And in this, because of how the process has devolved, things that are unclear become points of contention and points of misinterpretation, and as you've, I'm sure, been taking notes tonight, people can expand upon them for unfounded reasons. So the more specific you can be, the more detailed you were in your definition of where the houses are and how they're going to be situated and what they're going to look like, went a long way in providing people with understanding of what this is. And I definitely appreciate the fact that you heard us about the layout of the buildings, because you put in some articulation, and because, you know, previously the drawings that we had seen in the specific plan were pretty much, you know, laid out like a, you know, memorial cemetery. Everything was in a straight line, and that's not quite as interesting as a, you know, a residential neighborhood. So, and the fact that you've brought in some other people on your team who have provided some, the planning commission with some support on other projects will be very helpful. I would like to see the city take those properties now anyway, because I think I think that the Sierra Madre Conservancy may at a later date decide that they would want to incorporate that, but there are other conservancies that may take them as well. So it's not, it doesn't have to be the Sierra Madre Conservancy, but the fact that the city can then transfer them would be, I think, would be helpful. You know, for me, some of the unknowns that I'm concerned about is the relationship next to the Wilderness Park and the access road going up to the debris basin, and, you know, that fence and where that boundary line is. I think the proposed improvement to Carter is necessary. A development with only one way out has a single point of failure for something, and that, you know, has, you know, I was on the fire department, and it's only going to take one crazy little old lady to make the wrong turn and that road is blocked, and now you really do have a problem. So, while whatever you say about it only needs one, I think it needs two, and I think the safety of the citizens, should address that. So how it is resolved on that side of the development I'll be very interested. I know you moved the parking places out of the park, and I'm okay with that. I understand why the people in Crestfield don't want people parking overlooking their backyard. But one of my questions is, well, where did they go? And so I noticed there were hash lines in the presentation you had tonight, but I'm not sure whether those were how committed you were to the placement of those hash lines. So I'd like to get that clarified, and I think that if we can resolve with the county, you're going to pick up a great deal more space on that border with the Wilderness Park, and you could probably put in a lot of diagonal parking or something in there that would be very helpful both to the community and also to the people that are going to use the new park. This is an ongoing process, and there's a lot of give and take, and you've done an excellent job on moving the ball forward, and it's given us something to look at and get back to. So tonight, I think there was substantial progress made. So I'm encouraged.
I would like to echo many of those sentiments. I think that we saw some real substantive changes based on the direction that we've given previously. As a body, we sometimes have been criticized for not giving direction as to what it is that we want, and so I would like to just kind of enumerate some of the points so that when the applicant comes before us next time, some things that I think will help keep this process moving along. I know that we're going to get the presentation that was shared today, and so we'll be able to have some better ideas. I still have reservations about the maximum square footage size. And I know that over 1,000 square feet per house was dropped. The smallest lot is still about 1,000 square feet over what would normally be allowed there. And so I think that really understanding and updating the chart from the June 2nd meeting, it's page 133. It's the one that has the lot area, the maximum floor area per R1, and then the proposed maximum. Updating that to reflect the lots that are the single-story lots and what those other differences are so that we can get a better picture of that and really have it in black and white would be very helpful to understanding the size. It sounds like we've made huge progresses, and I want to acknowledge that out loud and publicly, that cutting off 1,000 square feet from what was proposed is a great step in the right direction, and I want to just be able to look at it rather than real time off of a 30-second view of a picture so that I can really synthesize what that means.
And I think, if you don't mind my hijacking just for a second, having the square footages calculated in our R1 standard would be really great. So then we understand what we're looking at in our language. And, if we're going to use the R1 numbers for new lots, that's fine if we include that. But I think we also should use the R1 numbers for existing lots, because I think if you're comparing this to existing development, it's sort of unfair to penalize them with the new lot numbers, which reduce further. So I'd like to see a comparison of the proposed versus existing lot R1 in our standards. That to me would be the most helpful.
And that's why this chart is, I want to know, you asked the correct question. Where did those numbers come from?
Right, and the issue here again is these are county numbers, so you can't compare them, but you got to make some adjustment for garages and maybe other stuff that's not included in our numbers. So it says the average house is 2,000. It's at least 2,400. but probably closer to 2,500 when you translate county numbers to ours. But that's why I'd like to just use one measuring stick and compare everything that way.
Right. So I would propose adding a column to that chart that I referenced earlier, that, because the third column is the maximum floor area allowed per R1 standards. I would label that new, and then have another column that gets added that's maximum floor area allowed per R1 standards existing. Because I think that that'll show us, I don't think many houses around are still at the new R1 standards, and people will be updating them as we want them to,
Yep.
to the existing R1 standards. So I think that would be very helpful to see. I agree that the 100% water retention question, water, I guess, is not my specialty, because I don't understand how we can say that we're collecting 100% of the water, but we're not collecting 100% of the water. So I think that getting some clarity on what the number that we've heard of 100% retention means. A bit of a nit, but I think that in the chart that I saw, the single largest lot on the entire development was a one-story house. I can't think of a better place to put your biggest model, and I might recommend reconsidering that decision.
Maybe put two. That lot is huge compared to the other one.
I mean, how big is that lot? It is 21,000 square feet, and that's the smallest home model you have placed on there. So if I read that and remember that correctly, I might revisit that decision.
Can I also add that it's next to a really big house on Sunnyside? It's like, it's 2-story, probably, it looks like 3-story, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Mr. City Attorney, where was in the specific plan is the guidance as to what the minor modifications are going to be? If you wouldn't mind sharing that.
I believe that is, give me a moment, please.
All right, I will keep talking. So I think that what we said, I think that what would be helpful as this comes back to us, I think we're getting closer. My guess is that we haven't seen a new version of the specific plan yet, because they haven't had enough guidance to really start including or updating it to all of the finalized standards. And I can understand that. That's a lot of work for a moving target. I think that producing a document that lists what those changes are likely to be so that we could address them before they got changed is probably something that would be helpful, with a level of specificity that will make us comfortable. In other words, here are the things that will now be shalls. Here is how we will describe this. We're going to change the maximum square footage. We're going to include, this will only be in R1 calculations. This will be the lot planning map. I don't even know what to call it. That beautiful, beautiful design that showed us what the different
Site plan.
the site plan, the enhanced site plan, whatever you want to call that, that will be included as part of the specific plan. Those are the kind of things that I think would move this along the most in a single meeting if we have enough time to digest that. And so, to the extent that I know that it's 72 hours for agendizing, and I think we put it out a week ahead of time. So if there's a way to get the packet sooner so that we have time to really digest what that would be super helpful in not having to see things live time, and fully appreciate the amount of change that went into what we saw tonight. For that to be in 30 days is certainly a sign that we're making good progress. So just so that we can be more helpful, I think, when we see it next time, that would be helpful.
Regarding the minor modifications, Chair, in the specific plan, that's in section 6.4, so page 76 in the PDF that I'm looking at. And one note, in the specific plan, it says that the Director of Planning and Community Preservation shall have the discretion to to make a determination regarding what's a minor modification, that needs to be changed to the city manager. The city manager is the one that's going to make that determination.
Yeah.
Per the development agreement.
And that would be great to have, exactly like you just mentioned, as part of the list of things, so that we can compare it.
Changed.
That's going to change, so that we can compare it against the specific plan and make sure that we understand. I'm not trying to get multiple versions of the specific plan redone, but I think we have we can pretty easily come up with a minimum set of what we'd need to get it closer. Is that fair from the?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, my preference is to see a revised specific plan with a red line, but I don't want y'all to go do a whole bunch of work that's just going to get lost either. So if you want to go that route, that's fine. But if you've already done that and you've got it, then I'd love to see it. I mean, the earlier we see that, the more we can digest it. And if the specific plan comes in draft form, before the full staff packet, that's fine. I mean, because that would give us time to read and review, and really, dig down into the detail level.
I agree. A red line of the actual specific plan is ideal, if that's possible, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of formatting that goes into these documents, and so I was trying to.
I've got a process question. So we're trying to get this ahead of time. Would we be responding in writing back to the director with comments so that we could see a completed specific plan at the next meeting? Or would the idea be we have another meeting to hash out all these revisions, and then the meeting after that we'd see a completed specific plan?
That's a fantastic question. I think that depends likely on the timing from the applicant. I can't speak to how long any of this would take them or what they would like to do to proceed. I want to make sure that we're leaving them with clear direction as to what we need in order to keep this moving forward.
Yes, thank you, Chair Dennison. This has been very helpful discussion. So I think two things, and I've done this before in other projects, where I think relatively quickly, based on the notes that we've taken tonight and in consultation with staff, we could produce a term sheet of sorts that will outline the changes. That's fairly simple for you to see. For example, the maximum square footage will be 3775. You can take a look at that and make sure that or whatever you desire. So we would then present that. It would be very helpful to get feedback to make sure that the terms that we presented, so you could respond in writing to staff, we would like you to add these things. And then at that point, provided we get your feedback, we can go ahead and produce a red line of the specific plan. And we can produce that prior to the next meeting. Based on what I've heard tonight, we will work very diligently to do that. It will be a tremendous amount of work, but I am confident that we can produce it prior to your next meeting, at which point I would just want to make sure that, as Commissioner Hutt indicated, that as we make these changes, that this represents the entire universe of changes that you desire to see. So perhaps that first step, as Chair Dennison has suggested, of getting the kind of term sheet, that's the interim step. We can do that very quickly. And get that to you. You could then provide your feedback. Hey, you missed these 3 items. We'll then go ahead and produce a red line of the specific plan, and we'll endeavor to get that to you as far in advance of the meeting as possible, so you'll have time to digest it. Also, provide any additional comments to staff. So if there's any clarifications you need prior to the next meeting, so we can make it as productive as possible.
Commissioners, is that an acceptable path forward?
Yeah, I want to clarify one last thing. It has to do with the park, and I forgot. Sorry. Since the Community Services Commission is going to meet on the design of the park, there was a whole lot put into the drawings by New Urban West about a berm and all this stuff, and tall trees and no tall trees. And I'd like them to be able to simplify it. There was a lot of residents who didn't want to have a big obstruction to their view. So I just want to give some input to the Community Services Commission to maybe open that up, because a small wall with some bushes that create separation might be just as good. And my feeling is that we're only getting 3 acres. If you put a huge berm down the entire length of that property, I mean, how much acreage is really left for park, right? So, I mean, to me, that's not a deal breaker, and I think they should be as creative as possible and simplify it so that, I mean, you're not going to satisfy every resident along that way, but I think in terms of giving us the most park possible, I just think you need a visual separation so, people feel they have some security, but allow the latitude and don't lock them into the berm that they've already committed to. I don't think that's important. Okay.
Earlier tonight, we discussed putting some standards in the specific plan so that our work on the design review would be mitigated. We're still expecting that?
I think that that's a great question. I think that it's our desire to see those, and how those concerns get addressed on how they come back to us. I think we have to.
Well,
we've given what we like
Okay.
and what we want, and so hopefully we'll see something similar that comes back.
Well, I think the applicant would like as clear an understanding, and we would like to make sure the specific plan incorporates all of our wishes so that we can move forward and know that we have, you know, a pretty good set of rules. So, my only concern is do they have the time and do they have the depth of you know, the teamwork in order to create that, you know? So I think at our next meeting, we're talking about Alverno, so we won't talk about this until the one after that, so that gives people a little more time. It's not a 2-week turnaround, but it's more. But that whole process, I see that as when that is revealed to us, that people were going, and you know, there'll be more of a discussion, as we've seen in number 1 Carter and things like that. So, but having that start and having that put into the specific plan, I think will provide both this body and the public with some clear understanding of what the result should be when this thing is done.
Is Alverna going to take the whole meeting? Is it possible to just have an agenda item just for distribution of information? Here's my point. If we're doing sort of like the term sheet, right? And then Peggy puts her points in, I put mine in, Tom puts in, you know, we all do. I want to see what they say too, right? And I think the public probably does. And so we miss that deliberative element. And so if we could at least, and maybe we could, I don't know what Brown Act lets us do and not, but I would like to be able to get all of those comments and see them as well. Because if I just send in my comments and then, you know, sounds like a month later we get a specific plan, I don't know
Where all the elements came from.
Yeah, I'm fumbling here, but I think y'all understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, there's a couple of concerns with that. Yes, Alverno, it's going to be a full house as well,
Yep.
just like this. We'll have to also take public comment again for this project. So I think it's going to be very challenging. Also, the packet would go out next week for that next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there another way, without violating Brown Act, that we could consolidate all of the comments and make them a public document that we could all look at ahead of time?
The challenge, Commissioner Hutt, is that you're all basically having a conversation, but the conversation's happening with staff at this point, so it's okay. But once we share your conversation with each other, we're getting into Brown Act gray areas. It's almost as if, using the social media example, someone posted their comment to social media and another person posted their comment to social media, and you interacted with each other's comments by liking it, or I would not recommend it.
Okay. Yeah, people make a lot of comments on social media about this project, actually. I don't like any of them. I just, oh no. I start typing and I go, no, I can't do that. Okay.
Sorry. Chair Dennison, regarding, I have in my notes here, follow up on design guidelines, because I think this one was the one point that both staff and applicant need greater direction on. You referenced at some point design guidelines for I'm blanking on the name of them. 41 Carter were discussed. I don't think you're pointing to that as a standard for design guidelines, or is the commission pointing to that? I guess we're not asking the commission to draft the design guidelines, but we are asking for some direction on which design guidelines you'd like to see, specifically on what subjects, so that those can be drafted.
Sure. So they were called the Stonegate Final Design Guidelines from July 20th of 2010. And if you reference a great example would be Figure 4, which has to do with recessed garage doors. This is all public record. It's been out there. You can get this anywhere, I'm sure. I'm sure Arnold's has copies if you'd like it. So a great example is Figure 4. It says appropriate recessed garage door, and it has a picture indicating the style guide that we're looking for, versus inappropriate non-recessed garage door, and it has a visual representation of those. And so I think that is an example of, and I know that this is a very comprehensive document, and I don't know that we're asking for a 48
That
page.
level. Yeah.
We're not asking for a 48-page document. We're asking for something that touches on our hot buttons, if you will. That a second story should be articulated with first story features. And that some of that may even be in here. This was a pretty comprehensive document, so there may be concepts in here that can be borrowed. But I think that the challenge that we're solving for when we talked about design guidelines was the rubric against which we can objectively determine in plan design review, what it is, whether this adheres to it or doesn't adhere to it. And the only way to get that is to put something, I think, in writing in the specific plan.
Yeah.
And so the thing that jumped to mind were these guidelines.
And I understand the example, and we can provide those types of examples. Staff can put that together with the applicant. I guess my question is, you talked about garage doors, and you gave an example of how they talk about garage doors. Now, how they talk about it, how it's talked about in the design guidelines, that's not an issue. We can provide pictures, and we can say what to do or not to do. Well, what beside garage doors do you want discussed? And those are the things that's the kind of list we want, because the concern is we come back at the next meeting and we continue to add on to the issues that need to be discussed in design guidelines, and we'd like to get some kind of we'd like a holistic approach to this.
Sure.
Well, I think the example that was brought up is that we were shown a picture tonight of some pretty nice looking buildings, and we go, oh, that's going to be great, but that doesn't mean that's the building that's going to be there when it's built.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we ensure that the buildings that we were shown are going to be then the ones that appear, on the land? And so we want to use that to set the standard, so we can say, okay, this has articulation, it is well situated on the lot, it's inside the 45-degree angles, it's varied from its neighbors, it has, or maybe it doesn't have the fake rock on it, whatever, so that we have some sense that we're going to receive what we were promised.
Yeah.
Conceptually, I understand. I just want to make sure that we provide design guidelines that satisfy the commission.
So we need something we can measure, ideally. What if we took those that were shown to us and just said, it's got to have this much of the side areas articulated out? You can sort of measure the articulation on what was shown us against what is presented as final, and say, well, the measurements are radically different. Does that make sense?
I think that the issue we face is teasing out the shalls from the sort of guideline-esque, because if you get too many shalls, you don't allow any flexibility, right? And so, in a subjective design review, I don't think this is that hard, because we just punt to design review and we figure it out as we're there, but we don't have that option. So I guess one of the things is there can be a certain, minimum few things that we say, each one has to have this, But can we have is it considered an objective standard to say it shall incorporate a majority of these features and list 12 and it has to have at least 7? I guess we're trying to get that guideline nature that we want to provide some flexibility, but we don't want it to just turn into a box, like if you just have a height and a square footage.
I would not think of the guidelines as objective standards. These guidelines would essentially be ahead of time you're representing to the applicant what you'd like to see, but I don't think they would meet the objective standard as defined under state law.
Okay, because I'm interested to hear that, because
let's-
that's a bit of a backtrack from every conversation we had when we had this conversation about objective guidelines. And what we at least the way I recall the conversation.
Maybe it's because it's in the specific plan?
If it's a standard in the specific plan, and we can 100% enforce it. If we're calling it a guideline and if it's not measurable, it will be difficult to enforce, is the issue.
Okay, because I thought that one of the alternatives when we were talking about design standards was that when you have a set of guidelines that can be replicated by anybody and are written and documented ahead of time, that then we were back on the objective side rather than the subjective side. Because we had the conversations, I remember very specifically, about Santa Barbara and the fact that in Santa Barbara there's all these guidelines and everybody knew when they came in it was either
You can have a red roof.
Yeah.
Period.
Right, and that's easier, because I think the Santa Barbara guidelines are pretty rigid. So if it's simply a red roof, can that be objective? I would argue in court it is, but someone can fight me on it. But if you were to say something like massing shall be toward the back and not toward the front, that's difficult to enforce is all I'm saying. But I think having those types of guidelines, if that's what the commission wants, is still valuable for the applicant to know so that they can design according to that ahead of time. Because the problem is, once it gets to the design review phase, they've already designed something, and it'll be difficult to convince them to redesign something based on commission direction. It'd be much easier to put that information in the specific plan, and I doubt with this applicant we'll be fighting over enforceability. So if the commission can have those guidelines ahead of time included in the specific plan, I think the applicant will build to those guidelines. But I want to be realistic about what we can and can't enforce.
You just brought up an interesting, if, God forbid, New Urban West can't build it, but we've passed a specific plan, will the next people that sign up to do the development, they'd have to abide by the specific plan?
Yes, yes.
So it would lock in any future development?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
But it won't, will it lock in the homeowners if they want to be weekend warriors and do a room addition?
If they want to do a room addition?
They'd already be over R1 standards, so they'd have to come for a variance.
They,
If they're built to the max. Yeah.
right. The specific plan would be the zoning code essentially, and if they violate it, then variance.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like you're looking for some homework in helping the commission on how we can provide some kind of a rubric that would stand up to the objective.
It doesn't, again, I wouldn't try to, if we're gonna think about guidelines, I wouldn't worry so much about creating strict objective standards as defined under state law, because that's very difficult. If we're not dealing with numbers, measurable figures, it's very, very difficult. Instead, I think it would be, if you want guidelines, to just articulate what it is that you want this project to look like, generally speaking, and we can include those, and I think the applicant will build to that if they agree to it in open session.
But we can do both, right? I mean, we can have a certain limited set of objective standards
course.
that say, I mean, look, the easy one is there's going to be X number of single-story houses, right? That's pretty easy. I want to make sure that is in there, right? And some of the other
Absolutely.
ones. So I think we can do sort of aspirational guidelines in addition to that, but I do want to make sure we have at least a decent set of standards, objective standards. That means that it can't just be a box that maximizes the floor area.
And if we heard the commission correctly, it sounds like essentially you want the applicant's presentation to be translated and incorporated into the specific plan, and that would serve as those standards that you're talking about now. And then the design guidelines would be something in addition to what was presented today.
Well, I think that the pictures today were pretty. I mean, but until we see actual details, it's sort of hard to know that actually is going to fly. I think to me that the site plan, the Turbo Deluxe site plan, that was really more important to me than the pretty pictures because, you know.
Agreed.
They have
And maybe there's even, maybe when they look at the turbo enhanced super site plan, that they can do some calculations on first versus second floor percentages so that I mean, that might be another way to do it because you said numbers are neat. And so maybe that's a way that we can, just something to look at. Separately from that, as the second part of the question that I think you were asking is, how would we set up design guidelines? I mean, I guess a couple of choices are we could form a subcommittee that could look at the Stonegate one and pick out the 17 of these that we think are great. Like, for example, D-1.6, two-story residents are encouraged to have single-story element to provide transition to two-story massing, right? Like, there's some good stuff in here that I think
You could just circle and say.
circle and say, include this, right? I know you're dying to get up and
Yeah.
say something.
Thank you, Chair Dennison. Absolutely, we're happy to do a combination of objective design standards, and I have no opinion as to any of the legalities of enforcement. However, I do want to direct the commission to Chapter 5, and specifically Section 5.5 of the existing specific plan. And so we did, with our design team, spend a substantial amount of time creating an existing set of design guidelines. And it says things like, this is Section 5.5.2, related to building mass form, scale, and facade and articulation. Primary facades without articulation or fenestration shall not be used. Further, second stories should be stepped back from the first. Further, transitions in height should be incorporated. Further, large volumes should be broken up into smaller ones. This also encompasses the guidelines related to roofs, windows, doors, exterior materials and colors, skylights, solar panels and chimneys, balconies, porticos, and porches. So a lot of what, and absolutely happy to incorporate the super deluxe site plan, the massing study, and that's a great suggestion as to a certain percentage, and we can calculate that fairly quickly, and we can include that sort of objective standard. But I do think we have a lot of good guidelines in there already, many of which I know because of our team were inspired by the Stonegate design guidelines. So I think a lot of that is already in there on the architectural design side. I think for us it would be helpful, and I think you've articulated them, but it is relative to floor area, it's relative to the articulation, meaning the change in plane break, so what percentage is first floor versus second floor, how many one-story units are there going to be, the unit mix that we're committing to. Those are the things, some of the things that we've heard, but I think a list of those things you wish to have a quantifiable standard that if it doesn't exist right now, I think that as you read further, there may be additions, but I think that the Chapter 5, in terms of guidelines, is hopefully in fairly good shape.
Yeah, I guess, thank you for pointing that section out again, and it is certainly something that I think stands another review of. I thought that there was a comment last time that you were before us that there wouldn't be a lot of articulation because it's more expensive to build where the axial load doesn't come all the way down from the second story to the first story. So I want to make sure that we find the right balance between what is the best cost to build a house as a box versus the articulation that we're seeing in this latest set of images. Because the images that we saw today represented when I saw them on the screen, they represented exactly what I think that we would be looking for directionally. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're able to make sure that conforms with the specific plan.
I have a comment. I went through chapter 5.5 and circled all the shoulds and underlined all the shalls, and it's like almost all of it's shoulds and shalls, and it does cover a lot. So that's why I haven't personally been pushing for more standards or design guidelines. But the big concern is that we want something similar to what we saw, and those are measurable. I mean, the amount that it's articulated on the first floor is 20% of the length of the building. And it comes out 10% of the width of the building. I mean, we can use those as something we'd go back to measure if we had a disagreement. And so it seems to me.
And it sounds like that's something that they're going to bring back in number form for us.
Okay.
I think that's certainly something that would help. Did that answer your questions, Mr. City Attorney?
Maybe.
So, city attorney and I are debating whether or not it would be prudent for the commission to have an ad hoc committee. Again, the applicant has indicated that there are design guidelines in the specific plan. So what would be your desire?
So you mean like a committee of two?
To review the architectural design section 5.5 and come back with any questions about it or recommended additions?
Or compare it to the one for Stonegate and see if we want to move anything else over.
Yeah, I mean, when you compare the two, now that I've seen it up against this, I mean,
to me,
they took a thesaurus to the design guidelines.
I think it seems to make more sense. I think that process is going to take a long time. I'm a little concerned about going down that avenue. I think it would be more efficient if we had this sort of term sheet of changes to the specific plan and we all comment, and we can comment specifically about section 5, and we say section 5 should include this, boom, boom, boom. That to me, I think is going to get us there quicker.
We all have the stone.
Yeah, we all have the
whatever
stone
it's
gate.
called,
We can say, oh, I like this one that's not in there, plug it in, or I like from wherever, right?
Yeah.
From Santa Barbara. Just don't do red roofs. All red roofs. I'm not for it. I think that's going to get us there quicker.
However the commission desires to proceed is fine with staff. I think it would be helpful though if we do proceed in the way Commissioner Hutt's suggesting, that all the commissioners do provide either say they don't have any feedback or do provide their feedback on both of those points by the next meeting, so at least the applicant knows that these are the universe of proposed guidelines and they can begin to work toward.
So when you said both those points, you want them to comment on the ones on the existing ones in the specific plan, and then what other ones that we want transferred over, say from the one Carter plan?
Correct.
Okay.
And when you say next meeting, you mean by the time that we have the Alverno meeting so that the developer has time to react to what we've provided?
That's not what I meant, but ideally, that'd be great.
Hey, could we get the presentation that happened today, like today? Because that would be helpful as well. Okay.
Okay. We have homework.
We haven't had to read any documents in a while.
Oh, I have one more question. When we provide comments, we did that before this meeting, and we got a summary back of what all the other commissioners had said. That was kind of interesting and helpful. Is that something we could do in this process?
We can do that, yes.
Okay.
In a published staff report, though, is the form it's going to take. It's not going to happen before the staff report is published. It's going to be included in the staff report, so that document's going to be available to everybody.
Yeah. Oh. So that's a timing problem?
It goes back to the issue that Commissioner Hutt was addressing. Is the question was, can commissioners receive the input from all the other commissioners ahead of time prior to the actual meeting? And I think that sounds like a serial meeting to me, and I don't think that would be lawful. I think the best way to go about it is to include all those comments in the staff report, and once that's published, it's going to be available to everyone, and that's what the commission is going to consider at its next meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay, does that satisfy your questions about how we should proceed?
Yes.
Is there any other comments from any of the commissioners?
No.
Then I would entertain a motion to move this to a date certain of August 2nd. Did I get that right?
August 4th?
Darn it, August 4th.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, let me find my agenda here. Go to page 1. Next up are planning commission reports. Do any planning commissioners have anything to report? Nope. Seeing none, I will hand this over to the Planning and Community Preservation Department.
As previously mentioned, the next meeting will be held on July 21st, and the commission will be considering both the master plan update for the Alverno Heights Academy, as well as another CUP for the adaptive reuse of the villa, which will replace the temporary use permit and will also address filming.
So I had a question about that. I know that the city council met and that the city council is going to meet again after we have our meeting. And no, they're gonna meet beforehand?
Beforehand.
So we will have
Yes.
guidance from city council on this before we meet?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, city council.
That's all I had.
All right, then I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Used to do my job for me, so I'll help you out a little bit. I get itchy. It's like, you do so long, it's like you feel like you should be doing something, you know?
You're the only one who leaves the camera. You gotta start that tradition back up. You gotta whack it nice and hard. There you go. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Oh yes, come on.
I think Bob used it to censor people one time.
I had to use that gavel once to